Chapter 42. Now, Brother Crown Prince is pleading for mercy because he cares about his family. Are you trying to smear his name? Gong Yimo glared at the officials as she spoke. Gong Che opened his mouth to refute. He could not watch his grandfather take the blame alone. How was he different from a beast? But just as he was about to speak, Gong Yimo glared at him. Brother Crown Prince is muddle-headed. Although the right Prime Minister is Brother's closest kin, and I can understand Brother Crown Prince's concern. But Brother Crown Prince doesn't want Mother anymore. You should know that when I came over just now, Mother almost committed suicide. When Gong Che heard this, the hand by his side clenched tightly into a fist. Mother, Gong Yimo continued, luckily, I saved her in time. Otherwise, nothing would have happened. Someone sneered when they heard that the Empress wanted to commit suicide. This is because the matter was exposed and she wants to commit suicide. Your Majesty, please investigate. Gong Yimo glared at him when she heard this. Then, she hurriedly explained to the Emperor. Mother knew that this was the Liu family's doing. She felt guilty towards Father, so she did this. She told me that she did not manage her family well. She has a heavy responsibility, but Brother Crown Prince did not do anything wrong. Father, please show mercy. After all, the Crown Prince reminded you and escorted you. Father, please don't blame a good person. Nonsense. Someone suddenly said angrily. This disaster relief cost more than 10 million. Even if the right Prime Minister did not have the ambition, he would still eat it. Gong Yimo's eyes were smiling, but a cold light flashed in them. This lord is right. This princess is also clear about this corruption. It's just the big fish eating the small fish. It's really interesting when I think about it. I heard that corruption of Shiju's disaster relief materials is a common occurrence. Only the right Prime Minister took the biggest share. This princess does not believe that there is such a good thing. We must investigate thoroughly. Her words made the officials who were involved in corruption in Shiju not dare to speak. The discussion hall quieted down. The Emperor listened to her long speech, but did not stop her immediately. This made her slightly relieved. She said earnestly to the Crown Prince, Big Brother Crown Prince, are you really going to take responsibility for this family that made a mistake? At this time, how could Gong Che not understand Gong Yimo's painstaking efforts? Seeing her argue with the crowd of scholars for his sake, Gong Che's heart warmed, but he still knelt there resolutely. Imperial sister, you don't have to say any more. Because of me, I am willing to resign from the position of Crown Prince. I hope that Imperial Father will be lenient with the Liu clan. After saying that, he kowtowed deeply with determination. Gong Yimo was furious. Crown Prince Gij, aren't you afraid that Mother will die from grief? She said the word die very forcefully. Gong Che understood what she meant. If he wasn't the Crown Prince, not only would his life be in danger, his mother wouldn't have it easy either. Sooner or later, she would die in the harem. But was he going to give up on his grandfather because of this? Gong Che looked at the side of the right minister's face that was covered in messy hair. He really couldn't bear it. Gong Yimo suddenly shouted angrily at the right minister, It's all your fault. It's not enough that you harmed Mother, now you want to harm Big Brother Crown Prince. Why don't you go and die? Her words made the right minister feel blessed. He looked at Gong Yimo. The little girl in front of him had a serious expression. It was obvious that she would really do her best to help the Crown Prince. That was enough. The right minister's tears flowed down his face. He suddenly shouted, Your Highness, Grandfather has let you down. After saying that, he quickly got up and kowtowed on the dragon pillar. Blood flowed like a river. The scene was in an uproar. Gong Che was stunned. He raised his hand in a daze, but it was useless. He looked at his grandfather who was lying motionless on the ground, and then looked at Gong Yimo. His eyes were straight, with a trace of coldness and emptiness. Your Majesty, the right minister, is dead. Chang Shi touched his body and said. There was a moment of dead silence in the main hall. Very quickly, someone dragged the body away. A person who had been in a high position for many years, who was always in the limelight, seemed to have died at this moment. When Gong Che heard that, his body went limp and sat on the ground. He had no way to recover from such a huge change of events. Mother wanted to commit suicide, and Gong Yimo forced his grandfather to commit suicide. Your Majesty. This person committed suicide to escape punishment. Could it be that he thought that with his death, the Liu family's sins would be absolved? The left minister suddenly stepped forward and sneered, "And Your Highness, the Crown Prince must be involved in this matter. Your Majesty, please investigate clearly. Today, he must destroy the Liu family." The Crown Prince was stunned. His grandfather, who used to encourage him to work hard, had died in front of him, and Gong Yimo had personally forced him to death. He felt like he was in hell. The battle in the imperial court was sometimes more tragic than the battlefield. Gong Yimo looked at Gong Che and sighed. The right minister has been executed. Let's not talk about the past crimes. Let's talk about this time. The Liu family did not succeed. If not for the Crown Prince's help, I would not have been able to see the opportunity. Hence, I think that the Crown Prince has already atoned for his crimes. Imperial Father, please let Brother Crown Prince off. The Emperor was originally rubbing his forehead. When he heard that, he looked at the despondent Crown Prince and spoke in a low voice. All right, the Crown Prince has atoned for his crimes. He has not done anything wrong. Send the Crown Prince back to the palace. Chang Shi accepted the order and quickly stepped forward. At this moment, Gong Che suddenly raised his head and looked coldly at the Emperor. Then, what about the Liu family? The evidence of the Liu family's crimes was conclusive. Was he still going to plead for mercy? As the Crown Prince, how could he be so unreasonable? Thinking of this, the Emperor was furious. Openly embezzling and using this as a pretext, the Liu family's crimes are unforgivable. When Gong Che heard this, he once again shook off Chang Shi's hand and deeply buried his head in the ground. His voice was choked with sobs. Imperial Father, this matter has not been settled. Moreover, I believe that the Liu family is not the repeat offender. I beg Imperial Father to investigate the truth and not rashly convict them. Give the Liu family justice. At this moment, someone from the Ministry of Rights laughed and said, Your Highness the Crown Prince's words are interesting. Do we have to wait for the matter to be settled before we can punish them? The Liu family is a relative of the imperial family, yet they knowingly broke the law. They should be punished even more. His words made the Emperor's expression turn even uglier. He waved his hand. What are you waiting for? Send the Crown Prince back to the palace. Gong Yimo was anxious. In her previous life, Gong Che, who had lost everything, lived such a hard life. Since she had already agreed to help him, she did not want him to make the same mistake in this life. Therefore, she quickly knelt in front of the Emperor and said loudly, Imperial Father, although they have all broken the law, depending on the severity of the case, they should be sentenced differently. Since the Liu family scheme has failed and Prime Minister Liu has atoned for his crimes with his death, Imperial Father, please let the Liu family off this time. The Emperor was in a fit of anger. When he saw that Gong Yimo dared to go against his decision, he narrowed his eyes dangerously. Shut up. It seems that I have spoiled you too much. You actually dare to question my decision? The heavy pressure of the Emperor made Gong Yimo a little breathless. She understood that pleading for leniency would only make things worse. However, the words had already been spoken, and she could not take them back. She took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. Imperial Father, you often say that it is important to establish the country and to pacify the country. It is important to be humane. Why can't you give the Liu family a way out? Impudent. She had rebelled. She had really rebelled. She actually wanted to lecture him. The Emperor was furious and said angrily, What are you waiting for? Take the princess away. She is forbidden from entering Taiji Palace. Chapter 43. Immediately, someone came forward to take her away. Gong Yimo panicked and suddenly raised her head, her eyes calm and determined. Imperial Father, Ersi Hen wants to make a deal with Imperial Father. This is really strange. Gong Cheng was so angry that he laughed and looked at her coldly. Tell me, what kind of deal can you make with me? Gong Yimo heard this and her thoughts turned as she looked at him with a burning gaze. Imperial Father, in these 2 years, Ersi Hen improved the technology of paper making, printing, invented the method of water filtration, and promoted the underground pipeline. A few days ago, I even proposed a solution to solve the perennial drought in Shiju. Hen believes that Hen has meritorious service. My service is to the country. When the emperor heard this, he sneered. So? Gong Yimo's heart turned cold from his stare, but she forced herself not to retreat. In the past, Imperial Father rewarded Hen a lot. Hen is willing to donate all of these to the construction of Shiju. I also hope that Imperial Father can let Liu family off on account of Urchin's meritorious service to the country. This is really the biggest joke in the world. A woman wants him to reward her based on her service. The emperor laughed. Meritorious service? As a princess, it's your responsibility to contribute to the country. You want to use this service to exchange for Liu family's survival? You're dreaming. I don't know what benefits Liu family promised you that you dare to disobey me again and again. As he spoke, he suddenly slapped the dragon throne. The entire hall immediately fell silent. When the emperor is angry, blood flows like a river, but Gong Yimo was already riding a tiger and could not back down. She could only take a gamble. Imperial Father. Her heart trembled slightly, and her expression revealed a trace of sorrow. Hen grew up in the cold palace. What I yearn for the most is family and friendship. She glanced at the absent-minded Crown Prince. Brother Crown Prince treats me very well, so it's only right for me to do so. Imperial Father, Hen doesn't want to see you being instigated by scoundrels to do irreparable things and hurt the relationship between father and son. You're so supreme that punishment and forgiveness are all in your hands. I beg you to let Liu family off on account of our father-son relationship. Before she finished speaking, there was a bang. The short table beside the dragon throne was overturned by Gong Cheng, and the teacups rolled all over the floor. Instigated? A father-son relationship? He looked at Gong Yimo coldly, his eyes filled with killing intent. What she meant was, if he killed the Liu family, would the crown prince still bear grudges against him? What a joke! As the emperor, what he hated the most was people going against his decisions time and time again, especially when he was threatened. This was the emperor's reverse scale, and anyone who touched it would die. Very good, since you want us to let the Liu family go, fine. In that case, the Liu clan's crime will be borne by you. His words woke Gong Che from his reverie. Imperial Father, you can't. But Gong Cheng ignored all of them and stared straight at Gong Yimo. And Gong Yimo looked at him with an indifferent look, as if she was already prepared. The emperor was furious. Gong Yimo, heed my command. You disobeyed your superiors time and time again. As a woman, you interfered with the imperial court. Your crime is unforgivable. From today onwards, your title and position will be removed, and you will be demoted to a commoner. You may accept my command. The emperor's decree made everyone unable to believe it. Even Chang she couldn't bear to look at Gong Yimo. Only Gong Yimo sighed and deeply bowed her head to the ground. This humble girl accepts the command. Thank you for your grace. Her obedience made Gong Cheng even angrier. He hurriedly stood up and strode out of the hall. Soon, someone came to take Gong Yimo away. Gong Che didn't even have a chance to speak to her. His whole body was in a daze. Why did she do this for him? Gong Che originally hated her. He hated her for forcing his grandfather to his death. But he knew in his heart that if she didn't do this, they wouldn't be able to escape today. But this time, Gong Yimo used everything in exchange for their narrow escape. Gong Che really couldn't imagine. She was only 12 years old. Even if she was intelligent, in the end, she didn't have any experience. Would she be deceived and destroyed? Without her family, where could she go alone? Thinking about it, his whole heart felt like it was soaked in vinegar, sour and unbearable. She did everything for him. At first, he doubted her. She took all the blame, but he couldn't even beg her. Gong Che fiercely hammered the table. He was useless. He was useless. Soon, the emperor's decree was issued everywhere. Not to mention what kind of storm it caused in the harem, the crown prince and the empress were only punished by being grounded. Raised high and gently put down, the schemer behind the scenes could be said to be gritting his teeth. After racking his brains, this was the result today. Gong Yimo, you're very good. Chapter 44. Sigh, riches and honor are like fleeting clouds to me. It's gone just like that. Gong Yimo was walking alone on the street. She was still wearing a plain palace dress. When she left, she had given her money. However, in order to send a message to Junshi of Gojosian, she had used up all the money. Now, she was penniless and very depressed. All the shops under her name were paid by Junshi of Gojosian. She and Gong Dai managed them together. Therefore, she couldn't go to the shops now as she was afraid that someone would tell on her. Fortunately, she had people by Gong Dai's side. As long as she stopped the message from the shopkeepers, she and Junshi of Gojosian worked together. It shouldn't be a problem to hide it from Gong Dai, who was still on the road. Gong Yimo wandered aimlessly as she pondered. She had wandered around countless times. The capital was prosperous, but in the end, it was too backward. Except for some beautifully made handicrafts, she really didn't care about the rest. Just as she was immersed in her thoughts, a horse galloped quickly toward her. The person riding on the horse was a young man in luxurious clothes. He looked arrogant and didn't slow down in the busy city. Fortunately, the road was wide enough. Otherwise, many people would have been injured. Gong Yimo shook her head and walked on. She didn't have time to care about this kind of thing. She was no longer a princess. Unfortunately, she didn't look for trouble, but trouble came looking for her. The young man in luxurious clothes was originally running well, but he suddenly looked at her, exclaimed in surprise, and stopped the horse. He was very handsome. Unlike Gong Dai's coldness and Gong Che's gentleness, his appearance was extremely dazzling and arrogant. His eyes were full of arrogance and unruliness. He seemed to be of high status, but Gong Yimo had never seen him before. Seeing him approaching, Gong Yimo looked left and right to confirm that he was looking at her. The young man sat on the horse and pinched his chin as he thought. You are the Chaoyang princess? The youth searched through his memories. He had seen her from afar. His memory had always been very good. After taking a closer look, he confirmed that it was indeed her. She didn't expect him to recognize her. She wondered if she could borrow some money from him. Gong Yimo was just about to smile when the other party snorted coldly. "Mph, I almost forgot. What Chaoyang princess? She's just a commoner." He had just received the news today and did not expect to meet her. It seemed that it was fate. Gong Yimo's smile froze on her face. Fine, she thought too highly of herself. She would just leave. Stand there. Did I allow you to leave? When he mentioned the heir, Gong Yimo had some impression of him. In the Dayu state, there was a king with a different surname, King Ping. It was said that his son was as beautiful as a pearl, but because of his bad temper, he rarely appeared at the palace banquets because he was afraid of offending people. Judging from his appearance, he was probably the son of King Ping. No wonder she had no impression of him before. Thinking of this, she looked sympathetically at the Shizzy. She still remembered that in her previous life, this Shizzy was killed by his stepmother when he was 18 years old. The truth was only revealed 10 years later. Seeing that he was not young anymore, she asked, "How old are you this year?" The young man was originally dissatisfied with her, but when he saw her turn around and ask such a question, he answered instinctively. 18. No. Why should I tell you? So he was dying. Gong Yimo shook her head regretfully. She did not want to argue with him anymore. She asked gently, "Is there anything you need from me, heir?" When she said this, the other party suddenly laughed angrily. "I just don't like the look of you." As he said this, his expression suddenly changed. He whipped the horsewhip in his hand at Gong Yimo. What the hell? Who did she offend? Gong Yimo quickly dodged. When the surrounding people saw that the noble was about to attack, they hid far away. Forget about watching the show, they wished that this had never happened. After dodging a few more times, Gong Yimo's temper was also affected by the other party's whip. Now that they were in the city and they were blocking the road, the city guards might arrive soon. Therefore, she rolled her eyes and grabbed the whip that the other party was whipping at her. She smiled evilly at him. "Since that's the case, don't blame me for being rude." She wrapped the end of the whip around her hand and pulled hard. The other party pulled back even harder. Using the recoil, Gong Yimo jumped onto the horse and sat behind the heir. She then turned the whip around and trapped the young man in it. Using his whip, she tied him up. As her martial arts skills were not on the same level, the young man was tied up by her before he could react. When had he ever suffered such humiliation in his life? His jade-like face turned red. How dare you? What kind of freakishly strong woman was this? She was so powerful at such a young age. You'd better let go. Otherwise, this heir will teach you a lesson. Gong Yimo sat behind him and chuckled. Sure, you can try. After she finished speaking, she went around him to rein him in. So from an outsider's point of view, the originally fierce young man was tied to the horse by a young lady who was much younger than him. This position was really degenerating with each passing day. The crown prince also belatedly realized this and was so angry that his face turned purple. Bastard! Let go of me, ugly woman. Do you want to die? Although Gong Yimo was young, she was quite tall. At this moment, she waved the reins and the horse rushed out of the city like an arrow released from a bow. The young man's body involuntarily fell back and landed in Gong Yimo's arms. He was so ashamed that he wanted to die. He wished he could cut Gong Yimo into 8 pieces. However, Gong Yimo was very happy. She leaned against the other party's ear and giggled. Go ahead and scold me. Scold me louder. Do you know how hot and charming you look when you scold me? The young man was trying his best to straighten his body. When he heard this, he was so angry that his face was about to bleed. Before the heir could refute, the girl's voice rang clearly and maliciously in his ears again. By now, the whole city must know that the insufferably arrogant heir of King Ping can't even defeat a little girl. The heir's reputation has been completely destroyed. Just thinking about it makes me a little excited. Ugly woman. You shut up. When they passed through the city gates, the first person the guards saw was the heir and they quickly let them pass. They could not afford to offend this god of plague. However, as the horse galloped closer, the heir's shouts could be heard. Bastard! What are you doing? Hurry up and stop her. However, before he could finish speaking, the little girl behind him poked her head out and smiled at everyone. Thank you for opening the door. I'll bring the heir out of the city to play. Don't worry. The guards then realized that the heir was tied to the horse. They quickly said, go after her. You, and all of you, go to King Ping's residence and report this. No matter how flustered they were, Gong Yimo had already run far away with the young man. As the horse galloped, the wind that blew against her face made Gong Yimo extremely happy. The dejection that she had been feeling for the past few days was swept away. She felt that she was more suited to the world outside the palace. After the heir made a fuss for a while, he realized that there was nothing he could do. He stopped wasting his energy and glared fiercely at Gong Yimo. Seeing him like this, Gong Yimo's wicked sense of humor welled up in her heart. She suddenly looked at him and smiled. Little brother, if you continue to look at me like this, I'm going to kiss you. Her words caused the young man's eyes to widen. Then, his eyes filled with disdain and disbelief. How can there be such a shameless woman like you in this world? Gong Yimo was not angry. She never cared about what strangers thought. You don't know because your world is too narrow. At this time, the horse had already stopped. She pushed him off the horse and remained on the horse's back. She looked down at him and raised her eyebrows. You need to go out and see more. Then you will know that a girl like me. Her eyes moved slightly and her words changed. She laughed arrogantly. Of course it's the only one in this world. The heir grimaced in pain from the fall. When he heard her arrogant and shameless words, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What a boastful woman. He swore for the 1000th time in his heart that he would definitely cut her into 8 pieces. At this time, he realized that they had unknowingly left the city far away. The surroundings were beautiful and they were by a river. Where the hell did they run to? What were the people guarding the city gates doing? Why hadn't they caught up yet? This place was deserted. He wouldn't be killed and his body would he. Seeing that the heir who had been jumping around the whole way suddenly became quiet, Gong Yimo could tell that he still had not learned how to hide his uneasiness. She laughed. Isn't it a bit late to be afraid now? When the heir heard this, he immediately glared at her. Who's afraid? Why would this heir be afraid? If you know what's good for you, quickly let me go, otherwise, when the people who come to save me come, I'll teach you a lesson. Gong Yimo walked to the river and washed her hands. She completely ignored the other party's fierce roar behind her back. Looking at the clean water, it was still better in ancient times. Not to mention pollution, even the parasites were much less. What do you think? When she opened her mouth, the other party subconsciously closed his mouth. Gong Yimo squatted by the river and turned back with a grin. What do you think if I drown you in this water and escape on a horse, would it work? Chapter 45. She looked like she was smiling, but because of her young age, the coldness in her eyes was especially out of place, making one's hair stand on end. She really dared to do this. The crown prince, who was sitting on the ground, gulped. You dare. You probably don't know my reputation in the palace. Gong Yimo stood up and wiped the water off her hands. She looked at him leisurely. I started killing people when I was 7 years old. Do you think I wouldn't dare? She smiled, revealing her white teeth under the sunlight. She purposely released her malice, and a murderous aura spread around her. She loved to scare people like this. It was very interesting, wasn't it? The crown prince was terrified. The murderous aura of the other party was not something that someone like him would have. But even if he was terrified, his dignity as the crown prince made him raise his chin high, looking like he would rather die than submit. So what? If you kill me, you can just wait to escape to the ends of the world. Although he said that, his beautiful eyes were clearly sparkling. They were watery and evasive, making it hard for one to look away. Gong Yimo actually liked this kind of youthful youth the most. In the palace, she had always played this role. In fact, from her point of view, the other party's appearance was the most realistic youth. She walked over and squatted in front of him. The crown prince was stared at by her and shrunk his legs. He felt that he was too spineless, so he puffed out his chest, looking fearless. His eyes clearly said, "What are you looking at? Did I allow you to look?" Gong Yimo could not help but smile. She patted the other party's face. It felt good to the touch. Name. King Ping's son died early. Even if she had heard others mention his name, she had long forgotten it. It was better to confirm it. Why should I tell? His arrogant tone was silenced when he saw Gong Yimo pull out a dagger from nowhere. Gong Yimo played with the dagger in her hand. The gems and blade on the dagger dazzled the onlookers, making them feel frightened. Name. This prince. His cat eyes widened as his anger gradually subsided. He muttered, "Shen Shi. 10 nights. Very well, we clearly don't know each other well, so why did you attack me? I don't like you. Can't I?" Shen Shi's heart was filled with tears. Mother, her eyes were so scary. You don't like me? Gong Yimo pondered for a moment before stabbing the dagger into the ground. It was right next to his thigh, and it almost hit the wrong spot. Shen Shi reflexively wanted to get angry, but when he thought of the fact that they were in the middle of nowhere, what would he do if he angered the other party and got rid of his corpse? A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. He had to endure. He had to endure this ugly woman. Gong Yimo smiled and moved closer to him. Her small face moved closer as she giggled and said, "Then what do you dislike about me? Eyes, nose, mouth. As long as you say one, I'll kiss you. Tell me, isn't this game fun?" The child in front of her was so adorable that her auntie's heart began to stir. Shen Shi was speechless. What could he do when he encountered such a shameless and highly skilled person? It was better to be honest. He looked at Gong Yimo's face with resentment. She was clearly small and tender, but her eyes were mature and wise. Although she was saying hateful words, her bright red little mouth opened and closed. Actually, she didn't seem so annoying, especially when she was close. Her sweet scent strangely made people relax. She didn't seem as bad as she appeared. Gong Yimo pinched the tender flesh on his face. She wanted to do this from the beginning. It felt so good. Good child, you haven't answered my question. You bastard. Let go of me. Damn it, I'm going to chop off your hand. He took back his muddled words. This was clearly an annoying brat. No wonder the emperor didn't want her. However, Gong Yimo became more and more enthusiastic as she played with him. She even touched his face. The skin on his face was really good. He lived like a prince and didn't know how he took care of his skin. It felt so good that it made people want to take a bite. Shun Shi was completely defeated. He begged, "Great aunt, I'm convinced. I'll tell you everything. Can you let go?" He was dispirited like a defeated rooster. Why didn't anyone come to save him? He had to compromise. Why? Gong Yimo regretfully put down her hand. Then tell me. Why are you targeting me? Shun Shi's eyes were watery. He didn't dare to complain and could only stubbornly look at her. Gong Yimo almost couldn't hold back. Isn't it because you made little sister Su unhappy? His words made the originally smiling Gong Yimo's expression stiffen. Little sister Su? She slowly chewed on these words and slightly raised her eyebrows. The little sister Su you're talking about is the Zhengguo whose beloved daughter, Su Miaolan? What's your relationship with her? Speaking of this, Shun Shi's face suddenly turned red. She's my mother's younger sister's daughter. She's my cousin. Gong Yimo slightly narrowed her eyes. The relationship between cousins in ancient times was really good. I don't remember seeing her. This was the truth. Since her rebirth, she had always deliberately avoided Su Miaolan because she was afraid that when she saw her, she wouldn't be able to stop herself from doing something. So in these past few years, even though she had heard of this 14-year-old and was known as the capital's #1 beauty, she had never seen her. Shun Shi keenly sensed Gong Yimo's displeasure and his expression couldn't help but become careful. You haven't seen her, but last time, little sister Su spent an entire year embroidering a double-sided embroidery and gave it to the crown prince. You saw it. With one word, the crown prince gave it to you. After little sister Su found out, she was sad at home for more than a month. Did you know? The more he spoke, the more agitated he became. When he raised his head, he saw Gong Yimo's expression that was a mixture of sadness and joy, a mixture of mockery and resentment. In a flash, that expression blocked his following questions, making him unable to speak. She was clearly only 12 years old. How could there be such complicated emotions in her eyes? Shun Shi felt that for a second just now, he seemed to have seen his mother. When his mother was alive, she would often look at him with a gaze that he couldn't understand, just like the current Gong Yimo. At this time, Gong Yimo suddenly reached out and untied the whip on his body. Just as he was stunned, the other side took out something like a magic trick. Shun Shi looked at it and saw that it was the double-sided embroidery that little sister Su had embroidered. Speaking of this, Gong Yimo somewhat laughed at herself. She had always kept some things that she thought were valuable in her space, and this embroidery was one of them. But since it came from Su Miaolan, she didn't care for it. You're talking about this? She coldly smiled. I'll return it to you. I hope you won't cause trouble for me in the future. Chapter 46. Shun Shi was confused by her sudden change in attitude. He wanted to ask, but when he saw the faint sense of loneliness on the other person, he couldn't bring himself to ask. Seeing that Gong Yimo wanted to leave, he asked without thinking, "Where are you going?" His words made Gong Yimo slightly confused. She still had to wait for Gong Dai to come back, but there was no place for her in the capital. Perhaps only when she was deep in thought would her small face show a sense of weakness. She was only 12 and had been chased out of the palace. What would she rely on to live? Shun Shi couldn't help but forget his previous hatred for her. He looked up at the sky and said in a small voice, "If you don't have a place to go. My mother left me a house." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Gong Yimo turn her head to look at him and smile. Shun Shi's face immediately turned red. Don't misunderstand, this young master just saw that no one had cleaned it for a long time and wanted to find someone to clean it. His lie was really clumsy, but it made Gong Yimo's mood miraculously better. Is that so? Then it would be impolite for me to refuse. Not to mention that Gong Yimo was living in Shun Shi's house, thousands of li away. Gong Dai was looking at the black hair in his hand and a trace of a smile appeared on his face. He was still on the road. The west continent was too far away and the yellow sand and loneliness swirled on the road. It was already late and they set up camp. Soon, the smell of barbecued meat filled the air. He didn't know how Royal Sister was doing. Without him constantly watching over her, did she still not need to eat breakfast? That girl Shin-er was very useless. How could Royal Sister hear her when she spoke so softly? Did she practice on time? The Imperial Palace was fraught with danger. What could she do if she was so tired? Gong Dai never knew that he was such a wishy-washy person. He laughed self-deprecatingly, but his eyes were full of gentleness. It turned out that missing someone was so sweet and bitter. He could only make himself busier so that he wouldn't indulge in it. Royal Sister, wait for me. Wait for me to become strong and return to your side. Only by becoming strong, no matter how strong, to the point where no one could stop him, would he no longer have to endure the pain of lovesickness. At this moment, he didn't know that the royal sister he missed so much had been demoted and was no longer a princess. Junshi of Gojosian, who was originally far away in the west continent, was overjoyed when he heard that his grandson was coming. However, a few days later, he received another letter via pigeon. Gong Yimo had been demoted. Judging from the princess's words, she was worried that the news of her demotion would spread to Gong Dai's ears and affect Gong Dai's mood. Therefore, she needed him to make arrangements in advance and help her hide it from Gong Dai. After all, Gong Dai would not think that something would happen as soon as he left the capital, and he would not suspect that the princess and herself were hiding something from him. Junshi of Gojosian burned the letter after reading it. After giving the order, he sighed and pulled his beard, not knowing what to do. Junshi of Gojosian saw his sad face and asked, "Now that our grandson is coming back, why do you seem unhappy?" Junshi of Gojosian was tall and sturdy. Because he exercised all year round, he didn't look old. Instead, he was as strong as a bear. At this moment, he drank a big bowl of wine and seemed to be unsatisfied, so he raised the jar and drank another mouthful. "Sigh, isn't it all about the scheming in the capital? Her Royal Highness is too kind, but now she has fallen into it. We can't let that boy know about this. Otherwise, he will definitely turn around and return to the capital." As he spoke, he told the contents of the letter to his wife. Li Zhongsha was a soft-hearted person. When she heard it, she became worried. What should we do? Her Royal Highness is only 12 years old. How will she survive in the capital? Junshi of Gojosian sighed. I'm afraid that the people who were suppressed by Her Royal Highness will take the opportunity to take revenge. Otherwise, with her ability, I won't be worried. As he spoke, he comforted his wife. Don't worry. The princess is a person with great fortune. Just now, she said in the letter that she will take good care of herself. When has she ever disappointed us? On the other side, when Shun Shiyi arrived in the capital, he ignored the people who were looking for him and went straight to the Marquis' residence the next day. However, he was a man outside and couldn't meet his cousin alone. Therefore, he asked to see his aunt and was accompanied by his aunt. Only then did he meet Su Miaolan. While Shun Shiyi was waiting, Su Miaolan's mother, Su Ayu, was advising her with a serious face. "Daughter, mother knows that you are thinking of the crown prince. But now that he has suffered such a great calamity, his status in front of the emperor has plummeted. Mother thinks that Shiyi is a good child. Not to mention that he is the legitimate heir to the throne, he is also good for you. Mother, you don't need to say anything about this matter. Your daughter has her own ideas." A gentle female voice floated over like a fairy's voice. When she lifted the curtain and saw that it was Shun Shiyi, she smiled at him. She was wearing a pink and blue tube dress that reached the ground and matched it with a white Confucian robe with a pale lotus flower pattern. Her hair was dotted with emerald green dots, each of which was precious and unique. Her outfit looked ordinary, but it was priceless. Shun Shiyi was stunned. This cousin of his was really beautiful and moving. But in the next moment, he didn't know why, but when he saw his cousin's exquisite appearance, he couldn't help but think of another little girl who was 2 years younger than her. They were all at the age where they cared about their appearance. When he saw her yesterday, she was still wearing a plain palace dress. Her sleeves were tied up by herself, and her hair was unadorned. Her fine black hair was tied behind her head. Her every movement was a unique style of elegance. Her outfit was very simple, but it was inexplicably eye-catching. Originally, he didn't think so, but now, he felt that the little girl wasn't any worse than his cousin who had the #1 beauty in the capital. Su Miaolan only thought that he was stunned by her and sneered in her heart. But on the surface, she pretended to be pure and kind. "Shengij, my mother said you were looking for me for an urgent matter." She was shy and didn't dare to look at him. If it was a man who had just awakened to love, he would probably think that he had won the favor of the #1 beauty in the capital and be complacent. For the first time, Shen Shiyi slightly frowned. If it was Gong Yimo, even if she was shy, she wouldn't have such a petty appearance. Then he was startled. Why did he keep thinking of that annoying person? Moreover, he actually thought that his cousin, who he had a good impression of, was petty. His brain must have been damaged. Shengij. Shun Shiyi's frequent absent-mindedness made Su Miaolan feel that something was wrong. En. Shun Shiyi reacted and slapped his forehead. "I almost forgot. I came to give you something." Speaking of this, Su Miaolan was very curious. Because Shun Shiyi was rich, he would always find something that couldn't be seen normally and give it to her. Therefore, every time at the tea party, she would always be in the limelight. But she didn't expect that this time, he would take out something very familiar. Su Miaolan looked at it in a daze. Sure enough, it was the two-sided rich peony that she had personally embroidered. The peony was the king of flowers. At that time, she had given this very satisfied embroidery to the crown prince on his birthday in the name of her family. First, it could let her Gij see her talent. Second, this thing was useless to the crown prince. With the crown prince's filial piety, this painting would definitely end up in the hands of the empress. It could be considered as leaving a good impression on her mother-in-law in advance. But she didn't expect the crown prince to give it to the Chaoyang princess. Thinking of this Chaoyang princess, she had once seen her from afar. That day, the weather was clear. She followed her mother into the palace to visit imperial concubine Long. On the official road, they met the princess's sedan chair, so she hurriedly knelt to the side to let the princess pass first. She was so favored. The other concubines only dared to use small sedan chairs for 4 people in the palace. But because she said it was too stuffy, His Majesty specially gave her a large sedan chair with 16 people hanging on top. Coming from afar, it was like a floating muslin pavilion, luxurious and unparalleled. On the head was a golden-colored glass lid, dazzling people's eyes under the sunlight. And the 4 sides of the veil were covered with overlapping layers of silk, decorated with pearls and precious stones, floating dreamily. It was said that this sedan chair was made by the Ministry of Works in 4 months. Sitting on it, one wouldn't feel stuffy or bumpy at all. It was really a supreme honor. Su Miaolan knelt, feeling unreconciled in her heart. They were both women, but why was she so high and mighty, while she, the #1 beauty in the capital, could only kneel on the ground like weeds to make way for her? She didn't even look at her. Then she thought of how the crown prince, whom she adored, was also very special to her. So much so that when she said she liked him, the crown prince gave her the embroidery he had been working on for a year. That unreconciled feeling became stronger and stronger. So much so that when the sedan chair passed by, Su Miaolan couldn't help but raise her head to take a look. A gust of wind lifted the floating veil, and the dreamlike blue gently rose up like smoke, revealing the side profile of the person sleeping soundly in the palanquin. She saw it right in the face. The Chaoyang princess was only 11 years old, but the side of her face was so beautiful that it was too much and too little. With her eyes closed, she didn't look as arrogant and domineering as the rumors said. Instead, she was quiet and magnanimous. With one glance, people would know that she was the endlessly favored princess. Su Miaolan suddenly felt a sense of crisis. When this princess grew up, perhaps the title of the #1 beauty in the capital would no longer belong to her. Previously, when she learned that the princess was abolished, she was happy for a few days. She was still the pearl in the marquis' palm, while the princess fell from the clouds into the mud. It was said that a fallen phoenix was inferior to a chicken. She didn't have to worry about her limelight being stolen anymore. Now, this embroidery was in her hands. Her eyes flashed, and she asked gently, Brother Shen. Didn't this embroidery fall into the hands of the Chaoyang princess? How come it's with you? You have seen the Chaoyang princess? She was secretly delighted. At that time, Shun Shiyi said that he would avenge her if he had the chance. Could it be that he stole this embroidery? Her heart was gloating, but her mouth was anxious. Brother Shen, you didn't do anything to the princess, did you? Chapter 47. Even if he wanted to hit her, he had to be able to win. Shun Shiyi's heart was filled with tears again, but he said, "Am I someone who hits women?" He raised his head arrogantly. "I got this embroidery from her. She was chased out of the palace and had no place to live. Coincidentally, I had a house, so I made a deal with her." His words made Su Miaolan feel pity, but when she thought that the former Chaoyang princess had to live under someone else's roof, she felt a lot better. That's good. She seemed to be relieved. Her beautiful eyes blinked and suddenly showed a sympathetic expression. The princess is so pitiful. She was chased out like this, and I've never heard of her having any friends. She must be lonely. Would Gong Yimo be lonely? For some reason, Shun Shiyi suddenly remembered the lonely smile she had when she heard that he wanted to take her in. Su Miaolan didn't notice Shun Shiyi's abnormality and said softly, "Brother Shun, how about this? In a few days, I'll be holding a tea party at the villa. Why don't we invite her? Let her get to know more women in the capital. Maybe she can find a few friends." Although she said that, she sneered in her heart. Now that the emperor had stripped her of her title, there was no way she would be allowed to rise again. Those noble ladies in the capital couldn't wait to avoid her. It was good enough that they didn't hit her when she was down. Haha, but Shun Shiyi didn't think so much. Out of kindness, he felt that Gong Yimo, this ugly woman, should make more female friends. Women should be weak. How could she be more valiant than a man? After listening to Su Miaolan's suggestion, he nodded repeatedly. "Okay, leave it to me." Su Miaolan was afraid that it wouldn't be safe, so she said, "What if the princess is sad now and doesn't want to come?" Shun Shiyi waved his hand. "Don't worry. She won't let down your good intentions. Besides, who do you think I am? I'll tie her up even if I have to." He completely forgot that she was the one who pinched him and couldn't resist. Su Miaolan was relieved and said, "Brother Shen, you really know how to joke." At this moment, in the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. "How is it? Any news?" As soon as the person came in, he was pulled back by Gong Che. At this moment, his expression was anxious and haggard, without the slightest trace of his usual calmness and gentleness. The eunuch was caught and did not know whether he should kneel or not. He could only say this with a sullen face. "There's no news. Her Highness didn't seek refuge with anyone. I wonder if she went to one of the shops under her name. That won't happen." Gong Che was very clear that to Gong Dai, Gong Yimo was everything, and Gong Yimo was also thinking about him in every possible way. This time, Gong Yimo had sent Gong Dai to his maternal family with great difficulty. She had also given him such a good opportunity to perform meritorious service. She was afraid that he would be distracted. She would definitely think of a way to hide this matter from Gong Dai. She had no subordinates, so she must have used people from Gong Dai's maternal family. Previously, there was also news that Gong Yimo had sent a letter to Zhenshi of Gojosian before leaving the palace. In order not to let Gong Dai know and worry, it was most likely that she was alone now. This knowledge made Gong Che's heart very sour. But it didn't matter. In a few days, it would be the day of the worship ceremony. His father would definitely lift his confinement. At that time, he would personally go to find her. On the other side, listening to Shun Shiyi's words, Gong Yimo was silent for a while. Shun Shiyi didn't dare to breathe. Previously, when he boasted in front of Sister Su, he belatedly remembered that Gong Yimo was not an ordinary woman. She was a girl who could subdue him in minutes and was more valiant than a man. However, he had already said it. If he couldn't do it, how could he explain it to others? Therefore, at this time, he very obediently poured water and tea for Gong Yimo. Only the heavens knew that this was a treatment that even his father had never enjoyed. Gong Yimo inwardly laughed. She could imagine how much trouble would be waiting for her if she really went. With Su Miaolan's vengeful personality, The fact that she had unintentionally stolen her embroidery was enough to make her hate her. So why should she go and look for trouble? Did she think that life was too easy? At this time, Shun Shiyi shook the teapot and found that there was no water. He couldn't help but become angry. Someone come, are you all dead? How can the teapot run out of water? However, no one paid him any attention. Gong Yimo raised her head and lazily glanced at him. Don't shout. I told the servant who was originally on duty to go back and rest. I'm the only one here. You have to boil your own water. What, do you want me to boil some more water for you? Shun Shiyi immediately became obedient. Looking at her full teacup, he dryly said, it's fine. I'm not too thirsty. Gong Yimo smiled, and a touch of gentleness appeared on her young face. Unlike some people who put on an act, her gentleness and indifference were already engraved in her bones, which was why people around her wanted to get close to her. Shun Shiyi felt that the other party had a comfortable temperament, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. Just as he was racking his brains, Gong Yimo had already gotten up. It's getting late. I want to rest. Also, I won't go to any tea party. If you feel that you can't explain it to her, just tell her that I'm sick. As she spoke, she pushed him out of the door. However, she knew that Su Miaolan wouldn't let the matter rest so easily. Sure enough, the next day, Gong Yimo thoughtlessly slept until noon when she was awakened by a knock on the door. She rubbed her hungry stomach and got up to open the door. In front of the door was a girl dressed as a maidservant. Seeing her open the door, the maidservant's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain that couldn't be ignored. However, she quickly adjusted her expression and squeezed out a smile. Miss, our miss invites you. Gong Yimo looked dispirited. I'm not going. As she spoke, she was about to close the door, but the maidservant hurriedly stopped her. She looked at her with a somewhat warning gaze. This miss is so rude. Our miss is kind and personally invited you. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Gong Yimo looked at her amusedly. Who is your miss? She slightly raised her chin and said in a strong tone, our miss is Royal Prince Liu's only legitimate daughter. You're just a commoner, so it's better if you don't make our miss angry. So it was her. Gong Yimo remembered that a year ago, she was punished by the crown prince for offending her. Now, she was rushing to hit her when she was down. She didn't know how Su Miaolan managed to invite her. In that case, let me wash up first. Gong Yimo was still wearing the clothes she wore to practice martial arts last night. She looked very out of place and didn't conform to the rules. The maidservant sized her up and rolled her eyes. She said in a very malicious tone, Miss, it's better if you go like this. Our miss has a bad temper if you wait for too long. She was pressuring her step by step, which really made Gong Yimo angry. After all, she had been in a high position for many years. She had an aura that others couldn't reach. It was this aura that made the arrogant maidservant in front of her panic. Seeing that the maidservant evaded and took a step back, Gong Yimo sneered. In that case, you asked for it. Don't blame me. After speaking, she walked out in large strides. On the other side, Gong Dai was rushing on his horse. Along the way, because they had a large number of people, most bandits would take a detour. So they only met one group of people along the way. Under Gong Dai's bloody encirclement, more than 1,000 bandits either died or ran away. As for those who ran a bit slower, their throats were slit by Gong Dai's sword. This was the first time the impression of him being a killing god was clearly imprinted in everyone's hearts. Those people who were unconvinced by Gong Dai's young age also gradually gave up their thoughts. At noon, their group set up camp by the river. Bai Sheng was someone that Gong Yimo specially assigned to Gong Dai. So Gong Dai trusted him very much and only ate the food that he handed over. Gong Dai looked into the distance. The further west they went, the more desolate it became. Many places were yellow soil and the plants were also very short. At this speed, we should arrive in less than half a month. When Gong Dai said this, his tone was very steady. Unlike Gong Yimo, who always treated him like a child, the people around Gong Dai knew that this master was mature and had a crafty way of thinking. Bai Sheng replied absent-mindedly. In fact, ever since he received the first letter from the princess a few days ago, he had been very uneasy. In the past few days, he had secretly dealt with countless letters sent to Gongju from the capital. In the process of intercepting the letters, Bai Sheng was even more alarmed by Gongju's methods. So, unknowingly, there were actually so many people who regarded Gong Dai as their master. Otherwise, why would there be so many people who reported to Gong Dai when the princess and Junshi of Gojosian worked together to conceal it? Looking at Gong Dai's somewhat young face, Bai Sheng swallowed his saliva. This child in front of him was extremely intelligent, ruthless, and good at disguising himself. At this time, it was only because he was someone that the princess sent to him that Bai Sheng blindly trusted him. But if one day, he found out that Bai Sheng and Princess Junshi of Gojosian worked together to deceive him, who knew how he would deal with him, this was really a tough job. Bai Sheng's head drooped. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that his future days would not be too good. But at this moment, Gong Dai was immersed in his own thoughts and did not notice that something was wrong with Bai Sheng. Clenching the black hair in his hand, there was only one thought in his mind: royal sister, it won't be long before I become strong. Wait for me, wait for me. Chapter 48. Suburban Manor. This was the dowry manor of the Marquis's wife. In the future, it would also be Su Miaolan's dowry. On the hillside, flowers bloomed. Many noble ladies sat on the ground. In front of them, there were some exquisite pastries. Not far away, in the rockery pavilion, there were some youths who were invited. Here, men and women were not strict. As long as they did not play together, it was fine. At this moment, a noble lady wearing 100 flowers embroidered dress whispered to the leading lady, eldest princess, I heard that Gong Yimo will also come today. Eldest Princess Gong Hanyu raised her slender eyebrows and snorted, what is a commoner doing here? Although she did not show it on her face, she was very worried. She did not want to see this royal sister who was very favored in the past. The noble lady wearing 100 flowers dress smiled, I heard that Su Miaolan used Liu Qingqing to force her to come. She looked at the eldest princess in front of her who did not seem to notice anything and did not say anything else. In any case, she had already reminded her. If she could not think of anything else, she could not blame her. This eldest princess, although she had the title of eldest princess, was not favored. Moreover, she was almost 20 years old and had not been married. In this era, she was a leftover woman. At this moment, Gong Hanyu did not understand what Qin Kua meant. She could not figure it out, so she simply did not think about it. On the other side, a little girl wearing a pink dress pouted and asked, Sister Su, you are too kind. Why did you invite her? She's so annoying. She even stole the embroidery that you've been working on for a year. You should just let her fend for herself. Su Miaolan covered her mouth and smiled, don't say that. The Chaoyang princess is already pitiful enough. What Chaoyang princess? She is not. The young girl raised her eyebrows, don't be afraid. I, Zhuoxi, will definitely get justice for you. At this time, Liu Qingqing arrived with a voice announcing her arrival. She walked in front with her head held high. She was wearing a cloud satin that was hard to get even with 1,000 gold coins. Her hair was combed into a horse bun that was the most popular in the capital at this time. Her hair swayed with her pace as she walked. She looked very charming. However, when people saw her, they all hurriedly passed by her and looked behind her. It couldn't be helped. The Chaoyang princess was too mysterious. Whether it was her comeback from the cold palace or the 2 years she had dominated the harem, she rarely appeared in front of people. All the family members present knew that Gong Yimo was also coming, so they all warned them not to go against her. Therefore, these young and energetic girls all wanted to know who was so sacred that even after being demoted to a commoner, their family members were still so afraid. This scene caused Liu Qingqing to grit her teeth so hard that they almost broke. But then, she smiled. The person they were waiting for was blocked at the entrance, and she didn't know if he could come in. At this time, Gong Yimo was standing at the gate and being stopped, but she did not get angry. She only said one sentence, I'll count to 3. If you don't let me in, I'll leave immediately. If it were other women, attending such a banquet was an honor, or women with ulterior motives would often need such a banquet to act as a go-between. However, Gong Yimo had nothing else to ask for. She didn't even care for the palace banquets held in the palace, let alone this kind of private banquet for a young girl. Her disdain didn't seem to be fake. When Liu Qingqing went in, she hinted that they should make things difficult for the girl in front of them. But if the girl didn't go in, would she be blamed? Someone quickly went to report to the host of the banquet. Su Miaolan originally wanted to watch the show, but if the girl didn't come in, what was there for her to watch? Therefore, she ignored the objections of others and personally came out to greet the girl. Gong Yimo coldly looked at her familiar face, smiled coldly, and walked straight in. A commoner, and a commoner who once suppressed everyone, was led in by Su Miaolan like this. It was undoubtedly like roasting her on fire. Su Miaolan's intentions were very vicious. But, what did it matter? Chapter 49. Yo, I was wondering who it was that needed Big Sister Su to personally welcome them. So it's the famous Chaoyang princess. She was the first to jump out. She covered her mouth and laughed. Ayo, I almost forgot. What Chaoyang princess? There's only commoner Gong Yimo. As soon as Gong Yimo came in, she received the hostile gazes of many girls among the flowers on the hillside. Hearing Zhuoxi's words, she wasn't angry. She just found a place to sit down. She wanted to see what these girls could do to her. Seeing Gong Yimo ignore them, Su Miaolan, who was standing beside her, became very anxious. She blinked her almond eyes and frowned. She's a guest. How can you be rude to little sister Gong? That's right, Gong Yimo should be the youngest person here. Zhuoxi was depressed. What kind of little sister is she? Everyone heard this and waited for Gong Yimo to fight back. Even Su Miaolan was waiting for her to make a mistake. However, Gong Yimo didn't seem to feel their gazes. She looked around and raised her eyebrows. Didn't you say it was a tea party? Where are the snacks? Where's the wine? Su Miaolan, you didn't invite me to sit here and do nothing, right? Su Miaolan was as impolite as ever. When she heard Su Miaolan call her by her maiden name in a commanding tone, she froze in place. By the time she reacted, the humiliation of the past had once again surged forth. Her large eyes were instantly filled with tears, but she still forced a smile and gritted her teeth. It's my fault. Little sister Gong, please wait a moment. Su Miaolan's appearance made Zhuoxi burn with anger. She slammed the short table in front of her and angrily said, "Who do you think you are? How dare you order your big sister around like this? Everyone here is 1,000 times nobler than you. It's fine if you don't kneel down, but you still want to eat and drink. Pay. You really have no manners." Zhuoxi's voice was very loud. Even the girls who were admiring the flowers in the distance turned their heads. Qin Kuo supported the eldest princess and slightly frowned, listening to the commotion. It should be her. Her. Gong Hanyu stared blankly for a moment, thinking for a few seconds before reacting. She raised her slender eyebrows, eyes flashing with a trace of bad intentions. In that case, let's also go and have a look. Qin Kuo sighed helplessly and could only agree. Gong Yimo saw that Zhuoxi was angry and seemed to be stunned. She suddenly touched her face and smiled heartlessly. Did I say something wrong? She turned her head and looked at Su Miaolan, who looked as if she was about to cry. With a look of disgust, she said, "You're the one who urged me time and time again, saying that you wanted to invite me over for tea and wine. Now you're standing here without moving. Do you want to continue watching the show? Then why are you standing here looking like you're about to cry? Don't tell me you just said that to act pitiful." Her words made Su Miaolan's face turn pale. Originally, she had done this to let others target Gong Yimo. She was happy to watch the show. But now she was directly saying that she was acting pitiful, using others as a tool while she watched the show. These words were very hurtful. She quickly waved her hand. "Little sister Gong. I didn't." She didn't finish speaking, but her trembling appearance made the hearts of women ache. Zhuoxi pulled her behind him and angrily said, "Bastard. Didn't you hear what this miss said? Kneel down. Kowtow to all the girls here who are higher ranked than you. This is the basic etiquette you should know as a lowly person." Gong Yimo acted like she didn't see the other side's aggressiveness. She looked around and saw that the girls around her were either standing or sitting in groups of 2s and 3s. Without knowing why, everyone felt a chill in their hearts when they saw her casually smiling. Some of them had seen Gong Yimo before and some of them had been warned by their families not to provoke her. They were all a bit afraid now. "Do you also want me to bow to you?" Her voice was calm. Although she was young, the aura she exuded made people tremble with fear. Zhuoxi thought that the others would definitely agree with her words and embarrass Gong Yimo, but they were intimidated by Gong Yimo's gaze and didn't dare to raise their heads to respond. Gong Yimo then looked at Zhuoxi and suddenly laughed. "Do you know why they are afraid of me?" She sat lazily and pointed at the people around her. She was calm and didn't seem to care at all. Zhuoxi was confused. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt that the young girl sitting on the ground in front of her had the indescribable style of her grandfather, who was a general. So she answered in a daze. "Why?" Gong Yimo raised her head and smiled. That smile was very dazzling under the sunlight. "Because when I was 10 years old, I killed 13 assassins in front of the harem's women and ministers. Little sister, have you killed anyone before?" When she said the last few words, she glanced at her gloomily. The murderous and indifferent look in her eyes made Zhuoxi's legs go soft and she sat on the ground. She retreated in such a sorry state, but no one dared to laugh at her. Gong Yimo just looked down at her and smiled faintly. "You are so afraid of a commoner. What qualifications do you have to make me bow to you?" When Zhuoxi heard her words, she was very unwilling to accept it. But when she raised her head, she saw the pity, coldness, and murderous look in the other's eyes. It was just a quick glance, but it made Zhuoxi feel like she was scratched by something sharp. She let out a small cry of surprise. Someone's eyes could be so terrifying. When she fell down, Su Miaolan, who was hiding behind her with a face full of resentment, was exposed. When no one was paying attention, she fiercely glared at Zhuoxi, who was still in a daze. What a waste. She was usually so arrogant, but she was scared by a few words. Originally, she only wanted to ruthlessly humiliate Gong Yimo. She didn't expect that even a commoner like Gong Yimo would be so difficult to deal with. Her hand clenched into a fist and she almost broke her teeth. Gong Yimo looked at Su Miaolan's twisted face and felt a burst of pleasure. She liked to see these people who couldn't stand her but couldn't kill her. She doesn't have the qualifications, but does this consort have the qualifications? Chapter 50. A high-pitched female voice called out. The noble lady, who was about to walk away, heard this sentence and looked over. She didn't know when, but Gong Han Yu had walked over. Her pair of slender eyes looked at Gong Yimo and sneered. "It seems like you've forgotten that you're no longer a princess, but rather a commoner." When Gong Han Yu said this, her chin was raised high. Her eyes were filled with excitement and pride, as if she had been waiting for this day for a long time. This was truly great. Thinking of how high up she was in the past, now she could finally experience the feeling of crushing her. Thinking of this, Gong Hanue's voice suddenly became sharp. "What are you in a daze for? Why aren't you rolling over here and kneeling? Could it be you want to look down on imperial power? I'm not as easy to talk to as my father emperor." Her words were filled with arrogance and the hidden threat in her words made Gong Yimo narrow her eyes to look at her. Seeing her like this, Qin Ku'er, who was behind Gong Hanyu, quietly moved back a bit, not standing together with Gong Hanyu. "So it's the eldest princess." Gong Yimo sighed. Her royal sister was flat-chested and brainless. No wonder she hadn't married at this age, there was a reason. Fine. She finally stood up and walked over to her. Seeing her like this, many noble ladies secretly thought that Gong Yimo should be about to give in. Would she really kneel? The wind slightly fluttered Gong Yimo's white exercise clothes. As she stood up, her trousers outlined her long, straight legs. Her steady steps were like a leisurely stroll, but her whole body revealed a noble and domineering aura. Many people's minds simultaneously flashed with the thought that she was far more like a princess than the eldest princess Gong Hanyu. Seeing her gradually approach, the eldest princess actually took a step back in fear. But thinking of the other party's status, she slightly stuck out her chest and shouted, "Still not kneeling." In the end, she was still a princess, so her angry shout was quite powerful. It made many noble ladies' legs go soft. However, Gong Yimo still looked over her like nothing had happened. She had a smile that wasn't a smile on her face. "Eldest princess, did you forget? Although His Majesty stripped me of my title, His Majesty once said that I have the right to not bow to anyone. What, could it be that Your Majesty has also deprived me of this?" Her words made Gong Hanyu remember that when Gong Yimo met Imperial Father, she rarely saluted. Thinking of this, Gong Hanyue's teeth itched with jealousy. "Really? But in front of this princess, you were at a disadvantage and spoke ill of her. This princess still has the right to punish you." Gong Yimo shrugged. "Of course." Hearing her words, Gong Hanyu's eyes narrowed and flashed a trace of malice. "If that's the case, someone come. Gong Yimo is dressed strangely in front of so many people. This princess orders you to strip her of her clothes and throw her out." Her words made the surrounding women give a small cry of surprise. This kind of malice, if it really happened, would Gong Yimo still be able to show her face in the future? Gong Hanyu fiercely gave the order, but the 4 maids behind her did not dare move. Gong Yimo's prestige was still there and even His Majesty could not do anything to her. "What, are you all deaf? Strip her clothes for me. Quickly go." Seeing that they still did not move, Gong Hanyu seemed like she had been greatly humiliated. She screamed and screamed like a madwoman. She forcefully kicked the maids while fiercely glaring at Gong Yimo. The jealousy in her eyes was almost tangible. Why did Gong Yimo have everything? Imperial Father pampered her, the Crown Prince pampered her, she was beautiful and arrogant, so everyone was afraid of her. Since it was like this, she would strip her clothes and throw her out, making her lose all face. She would never be able to stand up again. Seeing that the eldest princess was angry, the people following her did not dare disobey. The 4 maids slowly came forward. Seeing Gong Yimo's expression, they could not bear it. Gong Yimo did not care at all. She looked over Gong Hanyu and narrowed her eyes as she said with a smile, "Your Highness the eldest princess, not to mention your body being hollowed out by that boy toy, has he hollowed out your brain as well?" Her words could be described as earth-shattering. Many of the noble girls felt like they were about to faint when they heard this. Gong Yimo then said, "I have martial arts and you want to subdue me with just a few maids. Isn't that a bit too whimsical?" These arrogant words made everyone take in a cold breath. They wished they had never heard this before. This kind of royal secret, the more one knew, the faster they would die. You. Gong Hanyu felt a wave of anger rush into her head. Seeing her red eyes, the noble girls present all knelt down. They only hated Su Miaolan for being so meddlesome, causing them to be implicated. Gong Hanyu's finger was trembling as she pointed at Gong Yimo. She did not dare imagine that someone would directly say that she had a boy toy. How could she marry in the future? How hateful. How shameful. "Someone come. Guards. Call the guards over. This princess wants to kill this woman." When the princess left the palace, she would always be followed by a group of guards. They had not come in yet, but when they heard the summons, they did not care about the number of women present and quickly ran in. The noble girls on the Flower Mountain all screamed and retreated. Their movements also alarmed the proud sons of the capital in the pavilion by the lake and they all rushed over. Seeing everyone scatter, there was only one girl, Gong Yimo, left on the Flower Mountain. Very quickly, a group of palace guards surrounded Gong Yimo. The precious flowers on the ground were ruthlessly trampled and the blades in their hands were all pointed at the young girl. "What's going on?" The son of the Ministry of Revenue, Li Ku, asked with a frown. Beside him, a panicked noble girl hid behind Li Ku as if she had found her backbone. "It's the eldest princess, she wants to kill the Chaoyang princess." "Chaoyang princess?" Li Ku's eyes flashed with light. The fame of the Chaoyang princess had already spread throughout the capital. Different women were jealous of her and men admired her. At this time, the Chaoyang princess was in front of him, but unfortunately, she was surrounded by the black armored guards so he could not see anything. Gong Yimo stood there with a smile, admiring Gong Hanyu's crazy appearance. "Eldest princess, do you know that if you do this, tomorrow the emperor will receive a letter impeaching you? When the time comes, The emperor will be angry. I'm afraid that none of your boy toys will be left alive. You shut up. You shut up. Gong Han Yu's expression was almost distorted. I don't have a boy toy, I don't. Is that so? Her faint ridicule deeply stung Gong Han Yu's eyes. Just like this, every time she looked at her with this kind of eyes, it was as if she was looking at a jumping clown. She simply did not put her existence in her eyes. What are you doing in a daze? Kill her. Hurry up and kill her. Chapter 51. Shun Shiyi heard the commotion and hurried over. Seeing Gong Yimo trapped, he reflexively wanted to save her, but he was stopped by Su Miaolan. Brother Shun, don't go. Swords have no eyes. What if you get injured? Shun Shiyi was anxious. His jade face was filled with anger as he pushed Su Miaolan away. I want to see who dares to hurt me. Seeing him like this, Su Miaolan's eyes flashed with resentment. What was so good about Gong Yimo that her brother crown prince liked her? Even Shun Shiyi, who had only met her once, treated her differently. She really was a fox spirit. It would be best if she was killed by Gong Han Yu. It would be good if she died. Thinking like this, Su Miaolan did not allow Shun Shiyi to ruin the situation. Thus, she stopped him. Brother Shun, this is a matter of the royal family. How can we interfere? Just treat it as me begging you, don't go. She raised her teary eyes. She was as beautiful as jade, a rare beauty. Shun Shiyi took a deep look at her and suddenly felt a little bored. Why did he feel that Su Miaolan was different from the other sisters by his side? Thinking of this, he slowly pulled back his hand and strode over. The palace guard also had a serious expression as he gradually approached. Gong Hanua's voice was filled with killing intent as the slanted blade flashed with a cold light. Originally, Gong Yimo was just standing there, but at this moment, she suddenly lowered her head. Her shoulders were trembling, which was very strange. Gong Hanyu carefully looked over and found that she was actually laughing. The laughter became louder and louder until it turned into laughter. She looked at Gong Hanyu with deep pity in her eyes. Eldest princess, you're still so stupid. Gong Hanua's eyes were filled with anger. Her expression was fierce and her body was trembling, but she was choked speechless. If I was as stupid as you, I would definitely hide. It would be better than being used as a gun by others. Gong Yimo finished speaking in a low voice. Without waiting for Gong Hanyu to explode in anger, she took out something from her sleeve and slowly raised it. Everyone unconsciously looked over. Under the sunlight, they saw that on top of the shining gold medal, there were 4 large words written in flamboyant calligraphy. The guards turned pale with fright and all of them knelt down with a crash. That was as if I were here in person. Many people who had come to help looked at each other in dismay when they saw the guards who had been eyeing them covetously kneeling on the ground. All the guards were facing the direction where they were kneeling, and there was a proud and upright posture. Even if they did not speak, there was a sense of arrogance that looked down on the world. She was so calm and indifferent, without the slightest bit of fear. That's right. She was the Chaoyang princess, and the Chaoyang princess wasn't someone who would lose everything just because she lost her status. She was an extraordinary woman. And Gong Hanyu has not yet recovered from the unforeseen event in front of her eyes. Gong Yimo already took the gold medal and slowly walked in front of her. At this time, Gong Yimo was still young, but she was also as tall as Gong Hanyu. She smiled, took the gold medal and gently patted Gong Hanua's twisted and stiff face. Her smile was very bad and evil. Royal sister, I actually want to tell you every time. For a person like you, the best life is to spend your life in the princess mansion with a male pet. Don't try to be a smart person and hit a nail on the head. Roll back. Every time that gold medal patted her face, Gong Hanyu felt a piercing chill and ridicule. She bitterly glared at Gong Yimo. Her heart was filled with monstrous anger and unwillingness. Why is Imperial Father so biased? Why? There was only one pair of this gold medal in the world. One was in the Emperor's waist, and the other was in Gong Yimo's hands. Even if she was demoted, she did not take it back. So what if she was demoted? At the same time, she felt a burst of despair. Imperial Father is so biased. Now that things have come to this, what awaits her is the Emperor's anger. Let's go. These few words could be said to be squeezed out from between clenched teeth. Gong Yimo did not stop them, so the guards quickly left just like they came. At this time, the originally blossoming hillside became a mess. And in this mess, only Gong Yimo stood there like a pine tree, proud and lonely. The white training clothes on her body fluttered in the wind. Her hair lightly fluttered, and her snow-white little face was serious and indifferent. Without the protection of the guards, all the people who rushed over were exposed in front of her. She seemed to have sensed something and looked up. Some people were born to stand at the commanding heights. It was obviously just a faint glance, but that natural momentum made everyone present feel heartfelt admiration, giving birth to a desire to kneel down. She was so high and unattainable. Shun Shiyi felt her gaze, but it only lightly fell on him for a moment before turning to look behind him. And behind him was Su Miaolan. Gong Yimo suddenly smiled. But this smile not only did not make people feel happy, it made people feel lonely and depressed. The entire hillside was silent, and only her voice echoed. Su Miaolan, didn't you insist on inviting me to the banquet? Where are the flowers? The dishes? The wine? When she asked this, Su Miaolan only felt that all her schemes were like clowns jumping around, unable to hide. Her entire body trembled, and she almost knelt in front of Gong Yimo. It's coming, it's coming. Hearing her say this, Gong Yimo smiled again, but this time, there was a trace of tiredness and loneliness in her smile. Is that so? That's good. Shun Shiyi couldn't bear to see her like this, and couldn't help but step forward. The scenery here is very good. This young master also wants to drink here. Gong Yimo couldn't help but look at the mess on the ground, and looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. He felt awkward being looked at, so he simply said to the group of scoundrels behind him, Shu Yuan, Yu Ziqing, you're all dead. Come and drink. The eyes of the two people who were called out lit up. They didn't know why, but they actually felt that it was an honor to be able to drink with Gong Yimo. At this time, Li Ku also stepped forward and smiled gently. This place is big, you don't mind if I join in, right? Without waiting for Gong Yimo to answer, a little fatty came over. Me too, me too. I also want to eat and drink. The scenery on this hillside is still the best. Why didn't you say so earlier? You made me suffer the cold wind by the lake for the whole morning, and I didn't eat anything. Seeing so many youths volunteering to drink here, Gong Yimo was slightly moved. They saw that she had lost power, and couldn't bear to see her sitting alone and being made difficult by others, so they did this. Gong Yimo couldn't help but smile, and casually wave her hand. If that's the case, please. When she said this, everyone felt that it was a matter of course. Her calm attitude and magnanimity had subdued some of the noble ladies who had been hiding in their hearts. Perhaps a princess is a princess. No matter what she becomes, she's still a princess in her bones. It wasn't known who said this, but the noble ladies hiding behind the forest were all silent, and no one refuted. Chapter 52. After being frightened by Gong Yimo, Su Miaolan didn't dare to do anything else. Good wine and good food were sent to the hillside. Some of the frightened noble ladies took their leave in advance. In the entire manor, only the hillside was the most lively. Gong Yimo liked wine very much. The wine here was mellow, light, and had a long aftertaste, making people unconsciously intoxicated. In the past, when she was in the palace, she couldn't get drunk even if she wanted to. It was only now that Gongju was taken care of, and the Liu family was saved. After leaving the palace, she felt completely relaxed and began to drink. Most of the people here were famous nobles in the capital. Of course, there were also some spoiled second-generation officials who had nothing to do. They were usually very playful. Now that they saw Gong Yimo being so forthright at such a young age, the atmosphere became more and more lively. Originally, everyone was playing some games or chatting with Gong Yimo. She was so knowledgeable that no matter what they talked about, she always had a refreshing perspective on the topic. But when the moon rose to the top of the tree, she suddenly raised a wine jar with one hand and drank to her heart's content. That carefree and unrestrained attitude fascinated everyone. Perhaps some people didn't need to do anything and were naturally outstanding. She seemed to be in a bad mood, but at the same time, She was in an extremely good mood, so everyone present quieted down. Only the sound of the wine splashing could be heard, drenching her hair and clothes in an instant. Even her originally clear eyes were dyed with an intoxicating charm when she opened them again. Only today do I feel that only the princess can be considered alive. Someone in the crowd suddenly sighed. Gong Yimo grinned. You think I'm living a good life? At this time, the others were also slightly drunk. The son of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Yu Ziqing, smiled and said, although you don't have the position of princess, seeing the princess so carefree and unrestrained, as if you can live freely under any circumstances, isn't that good? Don't call me princess, Gong Yimo pouted and waved her hand. Happy and carefree. Ah. I wanted to be happy and carefree from the beginning. Gong Yimo looked up at the sky, seemingly recalling the thoughts she had when she was in the cold palace a long time ago. At this time, the sky was already dark. Under the illumination of the torches, the starlight was very dim. However, her side profile was so beautiful that it was hard for people to take their eyes off her. Perhaps in life, we can't do as we please. Perhaps everyone lives for others. All the shackles on our bodies are put on layer by the people we care about. If those people don't exist, then we are truly free, she muttered to herself. She didn't know why, but the little fantasy she had at the beginning was infinitely magnified. Didn't she originally pursue a carefree life in Jianghu? Her words made everyone fall into deep thought. They never thought that a little girl who was only 12 years old would be able to say such a profound philosophy of life. Perhaps the imperial palace was a better way to train people. Shun Shiyi looked at Gong Yimo's yearning look and could not help but feel depressed. You're drunk. As soon as he finished speaking, Gong Yimo looked at him with a pair of sparkling eyes. I'm not drunk. Shun Shiyi got up irritably and said, I don't want to drink anymore. I want to go back. Some people were still a little reluctant, but Shun Shiyi's status was the highest among them. They did not dare to disobey the will of this little overlord. What about me? Gong Yimo pointed at herself in a very silly and cute manner. Under the light of the fire, her eyes were dull like an intoxicated little lamb. It made people want to protect her well. I'll take you home. Previously, they all knew that Gong Yimo was now staying in Shun Shiyi's courtyard. Although Shun Shiyi was a person who committed outrages, he was very loyal. Therefore, when he sent her away, the others were very relieved. Unknowingly, after drinking wine, they and Gong Yimo directly developed a wonderful friendship. It was different from the relationship between men and women, but they appreciated each other more. The gate was already locked, but who was Shun Shiyi? He knocked on the gate and opened it, supporting Gong Yimo as they walked in. Even in the bustling city, the lack of entertainment in the capital was still very quiet at night. Except for the Red Willow Street, other places were quiet. There were only red lanterns in front of the door with surnames such as Li or Chen written on them. Solemn and cold. Gong Yimo leaned on Shun Shiyi's body. At this time, she felt that her mind was very clear, but her hands and feet did not listen to her. This feeling was really not good. Shun Shiyi did not know what was wrong with him. Why was he so protective of this girl that he had just met? Today, he even pushed away Su Miaolan, who he had a good impression of, for her. But at this time, smelling the warm wine on her body, Shun Shiyi suddenly felt that this feeling was not bad. In a daze, Gong Yimo asked, Shun Shiyi, what the hell, why are you called this? Your name is so strange. Her words stunned Shun Shiyi, and his memories uncontrollably flipped over. In this cold and cheerless street, some things that he had forgotten, for some reason, clearly flipped over. He could not help but look at the drunkard beside him and faintly smile. I'm asking you a question. Gong Yimo mumbled. Shun Shiyi looked at her appearance and could not help but touch her head. Perhaps it was because he talked too much after drinking, so right now, he really wanted to talk to this little girl who was snuggling up to him and talk about those old and rotten things. This name was given by my imperial mother. Oh. Gong Yimo's answer was very perfunctory, but Shun Shiyi really wanted to tell her. My imperial mother. She was also a strange woman. Shun Shiyi did not know why he used the word also, but when he said this, his eyes seemed to recall that woman with a fiery figure. As the legitimate daughter of the Jeune country marquis, she should have been a moral model for women in the world, but she was born to disregard secular etiquette and was reckless and flamboyant. Because she was so special, there were many people who wanted to marry her. My imperial father was one of them, and he was extremely lucky to win her favor and became her husband. As Gong Yimo listened, the appearance of the red wedding lady appeared in her mind in a daze. Every frown and smile was like a flaming pearl. Shun Shiyi's expression was originally melancholy, but when he said this, it gradually became miserable. But who knows? My imperial father had an ulterior motive. The real reason he wanted to marry my imperial mother was actually for my imperial mother's widowed sister, who is my imperial aunt. Because my imperial grandmother would rather die than marry my imperial aunt, he came up with this idea. Shun Shiyi's expression became extremely sarcastic. At first, it was fine because my imperial grandmother said that she would only recognize my imperial mother's child as her heir, so he was very perfunctory with my imperial mother a few times. Later, when my imperial mother became pregnant, he became unscrupulous. Chapter 53. He directly ordered my mother to create all kinds of opportunities for him to meet with my aunt. My mother refused, so he said that she didn't obey her husband's orders, didn't respect her wife's responsibilities, and wanted to abort the child in her belly. Because of me, my mother was disheartened. At first, she wanted to stop it, but later, she was too lazy to care. She coldly watched her husband fool around with her younger sister, while she sang operas in the Fu every day. Gong Yimo was originally listening in a daze, but when she heard this, her expression froze for a moment. However, she saw Shun Shiyi smile as if he didn't care. At that time, I was still young, but I remember one line very clearly. "I'll sing it for you." As he said this, Shun Shiyi pretended to be serious, cleared his throat, and sang softly. Who would have thought that the spring pavilion was warm for 10 nights and cold for a while? It was originally a sparrow flying to the phoenix's nest. His young and clear voice reverberated through the streets and alleys. It was clearly a fake phoenix opera that women could sing, but he sang it in such a low voice, which had a different kind of sadness. "Do you know?" He suddenly stopped and said to Gong Yimo, "Father didn't step into the main courtyard after my mother became pregnant." Added together, it was exactly 10 nights. Moreover, when my mother gave birth to me, he wasn't by her side, so my mother named me Shiyi. It was full of irony. She hated me because of the house and the crow. This kind of life was far from the reckless life she wanted, so she became more and more obsessed with opera. In the end, on New Year's Eve in the prince's mansion, she ignored everyone's objections and forced all the performers to go on stage to perform Farewell, My Concubine. But I didn't expect that her last sword strike would really cause blood to splatter. I was just below the stage at that time, but she didn't even leave me a last word. Shun Shiyi's voice trembled slightly. What happened afterwards was very simple. His father desperately wanted to marry his aunt and reached an agreement with his grandmother. As long as his grandmother agreed, no matter how many children there were in the Fu, the last one to inherit would be him. Therefore, his grandmother let that woman enter the Fu, and she became his stepmother. Gong Yimo gradually sobered up. She seemed to be able to imagine how that woman with heavy makeup would finish the last play alone on the stage. That kind of life, for a woman with lofty aspirations, was indeed too torturous. After all, she was a woman who grew up under the influence of feudalism. No matter how unconventional she was, she could not jump out of this pattern. Gong Yimo rubbed his swollen head as he sensed the deep sorrow emanating from the big boy beside him. Suddenly, he sneakily moved his face forward as he winked and smiled. "Singing? I can't sing, but I can dance. Do you want to watch?" Shun Shiyi was originally immersed in pessimism, but when he heard Gong Yimo's words, he couldn't help but look at her flat little body and chuckled. "Dance? You?" "Yeah." Gong Yimo jumped a little further away, then gracefully turned around and raised her head. She thought her movements were very elegant and graceful. She was wearing the simplest training clothes, but because she was drunk, her simple turn made her stagger. That funny appearance inexplicably made Shun Shiyi's mood better. "Look at you. Could it be that you want to play a drunken stupor for this young master? Don't ruin this young master's eyes." When Gong Yimo heard this, She looked at him with a pair of unconvinced eyes. She was not sober and was just foolishly muttering to herself. When I dance, even Father Emperor and the others have never seen me. Heavens, you're simply too lucky. Shun Shiyi couldn't help but laugh. I've never seen such a boastful person. Fine, if you want to dance, then dance. If you don't dance well, this young master won't blame you at most. Hearing him say this, Gong Yimo smiled with satisfaction and took a step further away. At this time, they were standing on a spacious street. Beneath their feet were bluestone slabs, and on both sides were tightly closed shops. There was also the sound of a night watchman shouting from afar. And Shun Shiyi was sitting on the stone steps in front of someone's door, looking at her. He wanted to enjoy this honor that even an emperor didn't have. Gong Yimo pulled open the hairband on her head and danced the most common sacrificial dance in this spacetime, He Qingtian. The evening wind lifted her long hair. She had lived like a princess in this life, so her black hair was soft and shiny. As her body spun, it fluttered and tangled together, disturbing people's hearts. Perhaps it was because she practiced martial arts, but she could easily perform those difficult movements. Or perhaps it was because she was drunk, but the originally elegant and dignified dance steps were performed with more confidence and freedom at this time. This was a group dance that Gong Yimo had seen during a sacrifice to the heavens. Because of the unique movements, she firmly remembered the mysterious and ancient style. But it was still very strenuous for her to imitate. Although she remembered most of the movements, there were still many places where she couldn't connect. She danced randomly in the blurry places, but she didn't care. The more she danced, the more she enjoyed herself. The sacrificial dance was originally sacred and without any beauty. But in Shun Shiyi's eyes, this was the most beautiful dance he had ever seen. There was no other dance that could compare. Gong Yimo danced energetically, but the alcohol got to her head, and her body became more and more uncontrollable. Finally, she turned around, but her left foot tripped over her right foot, and she fell straight forward. Shun Shiyi almost reflexively rushed over to catch her, and hugged her tightly. The girl's body fragrance and warmth formed a clear consciousness in his mind for the first time. Gong Yimo raised her head, and the warm smell of alcohol blew on Shun Shiyi's face. He didn't dislike it, but said, "What a drunkard. Fortunately, you met this young master." Yimo suddenly muttered a few words from the side. Shun Shiyi. What? You have to be careful of your stepmother. Gong Yimo half leaned in his arms, her divine sense unclear. If one day, you encounter danger, no place to go, you can trust me. She said it vaguely, but Shun Shiyi heard it clearly. His pair of bright eyes stared at her without blinking, but his heart was unprecedentedly warm. The world only saw the glory in front of others. Who knew that he couldn't trust anyone behind the scenes, and he was bitterly struggling. Only this little girl, who he had only known for a short time, wanted him to trust her in this kind of situation. Shun Shiyi's arrogant expression couldn't help but soften. He couldn't help but pinch Gong Yimo's tender little face. No wonder she liked it, it felt really good. Stinky girl. Humph, your words, this young master, I will remember. What are you doing? Just as Shun Shiyi was about to take Gong Yimo back to rest, an angry voice came. Gong Yimo was already sleeping like a log, and her breathing was very even on Shun Shiyi's neck. He raised his head, and at the end of the street, a man wearing a black robe with a golden crown was angrily glaring at him. He was panting slightly, and his bun was slightly sharp. At this time, there was no servant behind him, but Shun Shiyi still recognized him. Yo, isn't this His Highness the Crown Prince? He hugged Gong Yimo even tighter, and his face had a fearless smile. It's so late, and the Crown Prince is here. It's really strange. Chapter 54. Gong Che adjusted his breathing, but he couldn't move his eyes away from that little figure. At this time, his heart was filled with anger, but his mouth could still be considered gentle when he spoke. I ask the heir to return Imperial Sister to this one. Shun Shiyi's fingers tightened. If I remember correctly, she no longer has any relationship with your highness. Now, she is this young master's friend. Shun Shiyi had always been overbearing. Not to mention the crown prince who couldn't even protect himself, He had even choked the emperor in the past. Gong Che smiled. At this time, his breathing had stabilized and his smile was as gentle as ever, but under the moonlight, it looked cold. No matter what Imperial Father does, the blood flowing in her body is the Gong family's. She is this one's biological sister, so this one will naturally take care of her. Do you want her to live alone in a strange man's house? Although she is still young, in the end, it will still affect her reputation. His words were reasonable. No matter what, Gong Yimo staying with the Crown Prince was far more justified than staying with him, even if it was for the sake of her reputation. Thinking like this, Shun Shiyi's jade face became very unsightly. Gong Che had already walked in front of him step by step and could clearly see the little girl in his arms. At this time, she closed her eyes and looked a bit like a little girl. She slept very deeply and the rich fragrance of wine couldn't disperse. Gong Che's expression softened, but when he looked at Shun Shiyi, his eyes suddenly became sharp. You actually took her to drink? She is a girl, do you know? Feeling guilty at Gong Che's words, Shun Shiyi stiffened his neck and said, so what? We are all friends, what is there to be dirty about? Gong Che didn't allow for any explanation and hugged her. This time, this one will forgive you, but this one hopes that you won't come looking for her again. His words made Shun Shiyi angry and his thick eyebrows jump. Who she likes to play with is not something you can decide. After saying this, the two people's gazes collided under the night moon and sparks flew everywhere. Is that so? Gong Che sneered and didn't want to be entangled any further. He picked up Gong Yimo and said to Shun Shiyi with a calm and indifferent expression, forget it. I still have to thank Shizi Yi for taking care of my little sister these past 2 days. This one will visit another day to thank you. Feeling the emptiness in his arms, Shun Shiyi disdainfully pursed his lips, if it was you, you wouldn't have come. Gong Che didn't bother with him. He turned around and left. Shun Shiyi looked at their departing backs. For the first time, he felt as if he had lost something. He was very unhappy. As for Gong Che, who was hugging Gong Yimo, he felt his heart finally calm down. God knows, Gong Yimo disappeared without a trace the moment she entered the world. He was really afraid that he would never see her again. Fortunately, she was still in the capital and by his side. Today, he received news that she was invited to a private banquet at a manor in the suburbs. After he finished dealing with the matters at hand, he went out to look for her. He was also afraid that it would affect her negatively, so he didn't bring a single person. When he hurried over, the banquet's host, the one known as the #1 beauty in the capital, Su Miaolan, said that she was drunk and left with a man. He didn't know where they went, so he was almost driven crazy. Later, a youth told him that Gong Yimo left with Shun Shiyi because she was now staying in Shun Shiyi's manor. Only then did Gong Che breathe a sigh of relief. He fetched a basin of water for Gong Yimo to wipe her face. Seeing her little red face sleeping soundly, he couldn't help but smile. You really are a little rascal. Your Crown Prince Gidge is so anxious. It's bad enough that you didn't send a message, but you're still sleeping so soundly. As he spoke, he gently pinched her face. Her face was as soft as a baby's. That smooth touch was really the first time Gong Che had experienced it. He didn't know if it was because he was hurting her, but Gong Yimo actually opened her eyes in a daze. Looking at him, she recognized him for a long time. Crown Prince Gidge. Gong Che couldn't help but smile. His entire body relaxed. He wanted to say something, but Gong Yimo grabbed his hand. She closed her eyes and spoke intermittently. I'm sorry. Gong Che was slightly stunned. For a moment, he couldn't figure out how she had wronged him. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to force grandfather to his death. Her words made Gong Che's expression gradually become sorrowful. Grandfather's funeral was held in a low-key manner for 3 days, but the court was still the same. It was as if this person had never appeared. I'm sorry. Gong Yimo's voice was as weak as a kitten. She closed her eyes and frowned deeply. I've disappointed you. It's not like that. Gong Che reached out to caress her face again. I'm the one who should be apologizing. Grandfather made a huge mistake, and someone was adding fuel to the fire behind his back. He was surrounded on all sides. Only you stood in front of me and spoke up for me. Gong Che's gaze became deeper. These few days, he thought a lot. The more he thought, the more he felt that Gong Yimo was very kind to him, but that day, I still blamed you in my heart. It's my fault. He leaned down, almost touching Gong Yimo's ear. Forgive me for not knowing what's good for me. The one who should say sorry is me, he finished speaking with emotion. Every word came from the bottom of his heart. Although he was in a disadvantageous position now, and grandfather's death had a great impact on him, but if Gong Yimo didn't appear that day and all the crimes were established, then Liu family would be exiled according to the law. Mother would definitely commit suicide in order to protect him. As for him, even if he was alive, even if he was still the crown prince, what was the point? If that happened, his situation would be 10,000 times worse than it was now. Therefore, he was very grateful to Gong Yimo. He even thought that if Gong Yimo wanted something, he would be willing to give up everything to achieve it for her. However, his words were very touching, and his thoughts were rich, but there was no movement from her side. Sister. Yimo. Yes, she was sleeping like a log. Gong Che couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. With you like this, how can brother crown prince feel at ease when you get married in the future? He was just joking, but after saying it, he felt his heart ache. It was as if he really didn't want Gong Yimo to get married. Who knew that when Gong Yimo heard the word get married, she would open her eyes again. I won't get married, At this time, Gong Yimo opened her eyes completely. Her eyes were watery, and her whole body was light pink. When she said this, her eyes were very calm, as if she wasn't drunk at all. I said, I won't get married for the rest of my life. After saying that, she was a little dazed again. Gong Che heard it and was stunned. Why? How can a woman not get married? At this time, Gong Yimo smiled, closed her eyes again, and mumbled, I swore. Her voice became softer and softer. Gong Che couldn't help but move closer, but he heard her mouth moving slightly. Gong Yimo slightly narrowed her eyes. In front of her was Gong Che's side profile. At this time, his white jade-like ear was slightly red. Gong Yimo didn't even think and bit it. Chapter 55. Gong Che gasped and sat up. His movement was too big, causing Gong Yimo to wake up. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, looking adorable. What's wrong? She seemed to have bitten something just now. Did she bite the crown prince? This realization made her even more awake. When she saw Gong Che covering one of his ears with a red face, she couldn't help but ask, I bit you? However, she was puzzled. Why did he lean his head so close to her for no reason? Gong Che only felt that his heart was beating very fast, but it wasn't as cold as when he had a relapse. Right now, he felt like he was being roasted in a fire. His earlobe, neck, and shoulder that had been bitten were mostly numb. He didn't quite understand what the itch or electric shock was, but strangely, he wanted to try it again. No, it's nothing. He stuttered as his eyes flickered, but he didn't look at her. Gong Yimo made an O sound suspiciously. She was tipsy again and unconsciously laid down, turning over and continuing to sleep with her head covered. Seeing that she had fallen asleep again, Gong Che sighed in relief. At the same time, a slight sense of disappointment rose in his heart. Even he didn't understand why he was disappointed. He took a brocade blanket and covered Gong Yimo with it. Thinking of what she said before, he felt inexplicably happy. She said she didn't want to marry. Then she wouldn't marry. He could always support her. The next day, Gong Yimo woke up in the afternoon. She rubbed her eyes and saw that she was in a completely unfamiliar place. From the decorations, this was a place where a man lived. Miss, you're awake. The person who came opened the curtain was pleasantly surprised. She put down the basin in her hand and walked over. Seeing her, Gong Yimo knew where she was. The girl in front of her was Gong Che's servant who was highly valued. She seemed to be called Lian Xiong. Gong Yimo blinked. Where's His Highness the Crown Prince? Now that their statuses were different, in front of outsiders, she couldn't keep calling him Big Brother Crown Prince. Lian Xiong smiled warmly. His Highness is still in the palace. This is a villa under His Highness's name. Miss, please feel free to stay here. Gong Yimo nodded. She suddenly thought of something and asked, Has Your Highness been busy recently? She shouldn't have asked this question, but Lian Xiong acted as if she was used to it. His Highness has been very busy recently. After saying that, she frowned, and a trace of heartache flashed in her eyes. And it seems like there's something bothering him. He hasn't relaxed his brows for several days. Gong Yimo had an idea in her heart. Last time, those people had already given themselves away after their attack failed. They were afraid that the Empress would counterattack after she recovered. Therefore, recently, they must have shed all pretense of cordiality and came up with countless schemes. Sure enough, Gong Yimo did not see Gong Chei's shadow in the evening. Lian Xiong saw her constantly looking outside and couldn't help but comfort her. Miss, there's no need to be too worried. Perhaps His Highness is busy with government affairs today, so he's staying in the Eastern Palace. Gong Yimo looked out the window. I'm not worried about that. That's right, the Liu family is a large aristocratic family. Where is their fief in Daiyu State? Her sudden question made Lian Xiong feel a little strange. She thought for a moment. The Liu family's hereditary fief is in the area south of Yulo. The Liu family's ancestors are all enshrined in Yulo. Gong Yimo nodded, indicating that she understood. In her previous life, when she met Gong Chei, he already had nothing. Now that he had an external family, she could make good use of it. Gong Yimo originally wanted to wait for Gong Chei to return to eat together, but after waiting for a long time and not seeing him, she prepared to eat alone. At this moment, Lian Xiong hurried over. Miss, bad news. Her Highness the Empress has been accused of murdering the imperial heir. Now that there's conclusive evidence, she's awaiting punishment. And His Highness? His Highness is pleading for leniency in Jiaoyang Hall. Imperial Father, Gong Chei knelt in Jiaoyang Hall. In recent days, he had been dealt with one blow after another. First, it was his grandfather's accident. Now, it was his mother. The Emperor sat high on the dragon throne and sneered. What else do you have to say? Gong Chei kowtowed deeply. Imperial Father, this son knows that Imperial Mother was wrong to attack other pregnant concubines for this son's sake. But in this harem, how many people are clean? Imperial Father, Imperial Mother has been married to you for so many years. Even if she didn't make any contributions, she still worked hard. Imperial Father, please give her a way out. Don't abolish her. With the dragon crown on his head, Emperor Chong looked down at him coldly. He casually threw the evidence presented by others in front of him for him to see. Why should Jin listen to you? She harmed a prince and even attacked a pregnant woman. The Empress has lost her virtue as a woman. She has a heart as poisonous as a scorpion. Do you have any objections? Gong Chei was very clear in his heart that under the joint attack of the other party and the fact that Imperial Mother had indeed made a mistake, there was no possibility of a comeback. But as a son, how could he sit by and do nothing? He straightened up and faced the Emperor directly. Imperial Father, in the end, Imperial Mother did this for this son to protect the position of Crown Prince. After saying that, he laughed self-deprecatingly and bowed again. Just like in recent days, the court is in turmoil every day. Now, even the old matters from more than 10 years ago can be vividly displayed in front of people. It's also for this son's position as Crown Prince. So, why don't Imperial Father appoint another Crown Prince? I only beg Imperial Father to let Imperial Mother off this time. His words made Emperor Chong burst into laughter. Gong Chei was right. All of this was for the position of Crown Prince. And he had enough of this during this period of time. Those people who schemed all day long, if they could use their power to curry favor for the sake of the country and the people, then how could Daiyu State not prosper? No need to say more. Emperor Chong's expression was cold as he made up his mind. The Empress has lost her virtue. She is grounded in Fengqi Palace and awaits her punishment. As for you, Emperor Chong touched his chin and suddenly smiled. So what if he's the Crown Prince? Will the Crown Prince inherit Jin's position? When he said this, no one present dared to answer, but they all tensed up. He smiled again and said, What I want in order to conquer this great country is a successor who can lead my great you to the peak. Not some Crown Prince. His words made Gong Chei's face turn white. A deep sense of humiliation and the feeling of being played almost knocked him down. If the position of crown prince was nothing, then Imperial Mother's years of suffering and the Liu family's efforts were like a joke. Chang, she was the only one who could speak at this time. He frowned slightly. Your Majesty, this is not appropriate. Appointing the crown prince is a rule since ancient times. If you say this, if the aristocratic families follow suit and don't distinguish between the young and the old, won't it be chaotic? Emperor Chong snorted coldly. Appointing the crown prince is a mistake in an ordinary family. Even if it's wrong, it's just a mistake. But for the emperor, once he's wrong, it's a mistake that will affect the whole world. Emperor Chong seemed to have this idea long ago, but only now did he put it into practice. He frowned and said in a deep voice, Jun wants to let those people know. Instead of playing tricks in front of Jun and killing each other, it's better to do something to gain the recognition of the world. Jun is not a pedantic person. Jun will give everyone a chance. If Jun's son can beat Jun, that will be the greatest blessing in Jun's life. After saying this, he looked at the pale Gong Che again and said, You too. The throne is for the capable. Chapter 56. With that, the emperor left in a huff, not caring what kind of bloodshed his words would cause in the harem. After kneeling for a long time, Gong Che got up and left Jiaoyang Hall in a daze, heading for Fengqi Palace. Along the way, he was in a trance, the corners of his mouth sunk, as if he had lost his soul. There was no trace of the gentleness of the past. His appearance made all the palace servants avoid him, not daring to appear in his sight. However, he didn't expect to hear cries outside the hall before he even stepped into Fengqi Palace. He was shocked. She hurriedly ran in a few steps, only to see two palace maids pulling the disheveled empress. Obviously, the eunuch who announced the edict had already come. Empress Mother knew everything just now, so she was in so much pain that she wished she was dead. Mother, what are you doing? One of the palace maids saw Gong Che coming and hurriedly said with tears in her eyes, Your Highness, you're here. Please persuade the Empress, she just wanted to kill herself by hitting the wall. Crown Prince. Hearing these words, the Empress raised her head. Her hair was in a mess, but her eyes were bright and piercing. She laughed and said, What Crown Prince? What's the use of a Crown Prince? Listen to the Emperor. He said that anyone can be the Emperor. What's the use of a Crown Prince? What's the use of her painstaking efforts all these years? What's the use of scheming? It can't compare to a word from the person in power. A word can put all of them into a situation of eternal damnation. It's like a joke. Her crazy appearance scared Gong Che. He quickly knelt in front of the Empress and said sadly, Mother, since there's a capable person to succeed the throne, why can't it be me? Imperial Mother, please believe me this once. Imperial Mother, believe you? The Empress's narrow eyes gradually became watery, and her voice was sad and desperate. My son, can't you see the reality? In terms of power, we can't compare to Liu Xianfei. In terms of wealth, we can't compare to Long Gui Fei. The Liu family is weak, so they can bully us like this. They can do whatever they want. My son In this kind of situation, Mother isn't afraid that you don't have talent, but that you can't protect yourself even though you have talent. You're still an obstacle in their eyes that they want to get rid of. She cried as she spoke. So what if she was the Empress? She was just a woman. The status of a woman in the harem was determined by the rise and fall of the family or the favor of the dragon. Who could understand her helplessness and grief? The Empress' words were equivalent to a blow to Gong Che's heart. Reality was cruel and cold-blooded. Couldn't he rely on himself? Could he not do it? The distrust of his loved ones caused him to begin to doubt and loathe himself. The reason he wanted to become the emperor was because there were people he wanted to protect and the responsibilities he had to bear. However, he couldn't even protect the people in front of him. Instead, he caused them to live in fear every day and no longer trust him. What use was there for him? No, not only was he useless, he had no power or influence, and his body was crippled. This was the reality of being besieged on all sides. His heart sank little by little. Finally, he smiled coldly. Just now in the hall, he didn't despair when faced with his father's humiliation and curses. But now, he was in despair. He even felt that he had been sentenced to death and exiled to the infernal hell. Seeing him smile so hopelessly despite his deathly pale complexion, the Empress could not bear it any longer. She involuntarily knelt down with a plop and hugged Gong Che in her arms, wailing hoarsely, "Son, it's Mother who has implicated you. It's Mother who is useless. It's Mother." If she had kept her hands clean, if her family hadn't been caught, why would her son be like this? Her tears quickly wet Gong Che's shoulder. Not only did he hear the Empress' cries, but he also heard the sobs of the two maids. Even the entire Feng Qi palace was immersed in depression and despair. Everyone's honor and disgrace were tied to his shoulders. If something happened, he had to bear the responsibility. He didn't know why, but he, who was used to bearing the burden, suddenly felt that his shoulders were very heavy. The weariness made his heart weak. He didn't even have the strength to lift a hand to comfort the Empress. After an unknown period of time, he was responsible for comforting the Empress and everyone else. He left the palace in a daze. When he raised his head again, it was already dark, but in his ears, his mother's desperate voice still sounded over and over again. It was as if she was asking for his life, endlessly sorrowful. Gong Che couldn't help but think very coldly. His mother's family couldn't support her. Her past crimes were exposed. Because of the Emperor's words, she lost her greatest faith. Even if she was still alive, her heart would be like dead ashes and she would be like a walking corpse. Just like now, he was like a wandering ghost. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Other than him comforting others, who would remember to come and see him? "Your Highness." A surprised voice sounded. Lian Xiong approached with a lantern. Seeing that it really was the Crown Prince, she breathed a sigh of relief. She hurriedly said, "Miss heard that something happened in the palace and told me to wait here. She said that you would definitely come back. Your Highness, are you okay?" Only when she got closer did she realize that Gong Che's face was frighteningly pale. Seeing her, Gong Che seemed to come back to his senses from a dream. Hearing her say that Gong Yimo was waiting for him, Gong Che didn't know why, but his heart warmed slightly, and his whole person became a little more lively. But when he thought of what happened today, the corner of his mouth quickly relaxed. He tiredly rubbed between his eyebrows, pulled himself together, and walked into the residence. When he entered, he only saw that all the dishes were still warm. Gong Yimo quickly glanced to the side, and her hand quickly picked up a meatball and stuffed it into her mouth. When Gong Che saw this, he couldn't help but laugh. When he laughed, Gong Yimo raised her head to look at him. Her large eyes were filled with annoyance. Her small mouth was pouted, and she didn't move or swallow. She looked very cute and comical, silly and adorable. "You must be starving." He gently smiled and sat next to Gong Yimo. When he saw that the table was filled with his favorite dishes, his expression became even gentler. He didn't want to care about what happened in the palace. At this moment, his heart was peaceful, and he felt that a family was just like this. Gong Yimo saw that he didn't move, and quickly added more dishes for him with a smile. "Crown Prince Gij's family's chef is really good at cooking. I was so hungry when I smelled it just now." Seeing that she was exaggerating, Gong Che gently patted her head. "In the future, you don't have to wait for me. If you're hungry, you can eat first, understand?" Gong Yimo nodded. Looking at his expression, it was clear that he had something on his mind but didn't want to say it. She couldn't help but carefully ask, "Big brother, how is the situation in the palace now? Is Her Highness well?" Her words made Gong Che unable to maintain his gentle smile, and his expression gradually turned cold. But not saying it wouldn't solve the problem, so Gong Yimo gently held his hand. "What is it that you can't even tell me?" As she said this, she lightly pouted, and shamelessly acted coquettishly. Gong Che smiled bitterly, feeling the warmth from the other's hand. He didn't want Gong Yimo to worry, so he tried to simplify the matter. Chapter 57. More than 10 years ago, Imperial Mother hurt several pregnant concubines for me. At that time, it was suppressed, but now there is concrete evidence against her. He only talked about his Imperial Mother and did not talk about himself at all. Gong Yimo frowned slightly. He was really a pig-like teammate. How could he be such a burden? Or could it be that the Empress could not escape from suicide, even if she changed her path? Then how will His Majesty deal with the Empress? Gong Che sighed deeply, but still forced a smile. I went to plead for leniency today. Imperial father put Imperial mother in confinement. As for what punishment he will give, I don't know yet. Gong Yimo heard this and couldn't help but reach out to touch Gong Che's swollen forehead. He no longer called himself Gu in front of her, but really treated her as his younger sister, a confidant. It can't be that simple, right? Gong Yimo said worriedly. Imperial father is not so easy to talk to, and he has always been decisive. Why did he delay the sentence? Brother Crown Prince, what did you do? Or, what did His Majesty do? His Majesty, Gong Che couldn't help but think of the Emperor's indifferent look when he looked at him in the palace hall. That sentence was even more unbearable than directly stripping him of the position of Crown Prince. He curled his lips, trying to make himself look not sad, but he didn't know that his smile was more miserable than not smiling. Because Imperial father felt that the disputes in recent days were all caused by the position of Crown Prince, so. When he said this, although there was a smile on his lips, his starry eyes finally dimmed and no longer had the light. So Imperial father said that the position of Emperor should be inherited by the capable. No matter who the Crown Prince is, he will give them all a chance and treat them equally. It still came. In the previous life, because of this decision, the competition between the princes could be said to be unprecedented. It was chaos. But Gong Sheng always sat high up in the fishing platform and did not make any comments. However, his actions still brought about positive benefits. Many princes had put in a lot of hard work for their political achievements, which had also benefited many people. However, this was a disaster for the Crown Prince. At this moment, she looked at Gong Che. Seeing her sad expression, Gong Che comforted her. It's okay. Father's actions are for the sake of the world. He's right. If a family chooses the wrong head, it will only harm the family. But if a country chooses the wrong ruler, it will harm the world. He's right. He's right. Gong Che explained with a smile. No one knew if he was trying to convince himself or Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo could feel his cold and trembling hand under her palm, but he still maintained a smile to comfort her. He was only 16 years old. In Gong Yimo's era, he was still a child. But here, he was already able to shoulder all the responsibilities with his young shoulders. It's just that, his power and wealth could not be compared to Liu Xianfei and Long Gui Fei's son. Now, even the position of Crown Prince that he fought so hard for has become dispensable. It can be said that everyone around him, including his more than 10 years of hard work, had turned into bubbles in an instant. He was the object of everyone's expectations, but now he was hit to this point. It can be said that the pressure, guilt, and pain on him was no less than the Empress. But he still had to comfort the Empress, comfort himself, and comfort the Liu family. The Empress could still cry, she could still make a fuss, she could even commit suicide, but he could not. Gong Yimo raised her hand and touched his face. Gong Che was stunned and smiled. What's wrong? If you don't want to smile, then don't smile, Gong Yimo murmured. Her words made Gong Che's smiling face stiffen. She stood up, walked over and gently hugged his head. Are you sad? Do you want to cry? If you want to cry, you can cry, in my arms, no one can see. Gong Che sat on the chair with his head held by her. Finally, he smiled. What are you saying? Why would I want to cry? Gong Yimo had already hugged his head and gently patted his shoulder. It's okay if you don't want to cry, just close your eyes and rest. She was like coaxing a child, gently patting his back. Her gentle fragrance wrapped Gong Che, so soft and tolerant that Gong Che could not help but slowly hug Gong Yimo, burying his head deep into her arms. He was so tired. He did not want to be the Crown Prince anymore, but he had to be the Crown Prince. But one day, when the Crown Prince became dispensable, he really did not know what else he could do. For more than 10 years, how could he repay his family's earnest hope? He felt as if his entire body was being burned in a raging fire. It was clear that his family had done something wrong, but he did not even have the right to blame them. Everyone made mistakes in the name of him, so he could only stand up and bear all of it. But what could he do? He also wanted. He also wanted to cry like Imperial Mother. He also wanted to disregard everything, to complain about Imperial Father's favoritism, or for himself, to complain once. Feeling the slight wetness on his chest, Gong Che suppressed himself. Even if he wanted to cry, he did not make a single sound. Gong Yimo could not help but think that in her previous life, she was also in the wrong. She only asked for what she deserved after she put in so much effort. She was strong and did not know how to be considerate. So, Gong Che did not like her. Even if he did not like her, he should not have thrown her away after making use of her. But today, Gong Yimo decided to forgive him. Gong Che, I won't bicker with you about the emotional issues from my previous life. In this life, I'll obediently be your younger sister and do my best for you. I only hope that you'll truly be a benevolent and good emperor. It can also be considered as atonement for the slaughter I committed in my previous life. But this time, you must not disappoint me again. The next day, when Gong Che woke up, he raised his head and found himself in his own room. He could not help but narrow his eyes and think about what happened yesterday. Yesterday's final, scene after scene, Gong Yimo's embrace and comfort, and him, after crying, he fell asleep in her arms. Gong Che's jade face turned red. In the end, he was only 16 years old. No matter how mature he usually was, he was still as pure as a little white rabbit in some aspects. He could not help but toss and turn on the bed, tossing and turning. He wished that he could forget everything that happened last night. How could there be such a stain in his life? And it was his most beloved sister. What was wrong with this world? The person who cried in his sister's arms last night was definitely not him. When Gong Yimo came in, she saw Gong Che's frantic look. What's wrong? When he heard her voice, Gong Che's face turned from red to purple, and his heart beat even faster. He was about to have a relapse, right? He must have a relapse. Gong Yimo did not care about his volcanic thoughts. She twisted the handkerchief and handed it to Gong Che. Gong Che took it numbly and wiped his face. The entire process was like falling into a fog. Seeing him like this, Gong Yimo could not help but secretly laugh. No matter how grand and domineering they would become in the future, they were still young now. Chapter 58. She sat by the bed and watched as Gong Che finished wiping his face. Then she took the handkerchief and threw it into the water basin. She looked at him with a burning gaze. What is it? Gong Che's face could not get any redder. Originally, he should not be so pure. After all, the princes could get married on the 15th. But because it was not easy for him to be the crown prince, he did not have a high or low position in choosing a wife, so it was delayed. That was why he was like this. Gong Yimo really wanted to pinch his face, but she stopped herself. She coughed and said with a serious expression, "It's like this. Last night, I heard your report and thought about it all night. Now I have a plan. Does Crown Prince Gidge want to hear it?" Hearing her say yes, Gong Che was naturally all ears. He wanted to get rid of the current awkwardness as soon as possible. Gong Yimo did not detect his little thoughts and continued with a smile. Since the Empress has made a mistake and the evidence is conclusive, she should be punished. Since it's like this, Crown Prince Gidge will go into the palace today and persuade the Empress to hand over the Phoenix Seal before the Emperor gives the decree. Then, go to the Holy Buddha Temple to cultivate to atone for her sins. She settled the Empress' path with just a few words. Gong Che couldn't help but sigh. Now that it was like this, rather than waiting for Fu Huang to be deposed under the pressure, it was better for Muhu to hand over the Phoenix Seal. At least she could keep the Empress' position and dignity. But will it be this simple? Gong Che was very suspicious. The other side not only wanted to pull Muhu down, they were also targeting him. If they failed this time, there would be a next time. Naturally, it won't be this simple. Gong Yimo sat by his bed with narrowed eyes. Her 2 feet unconsciously swayed. Today, she had a string of small bells tied to her feet. When she moved, the jingling sounds were very pleasant. She touched her face and slowly threw out an earth-shattering sentence. Crown Prince Gidge, after persuading the Empress, you should also leave the capital. Gong Che slightly opened his eyes and subconsciously said, Imperial Mother will not agree. Not only that, the Liu family would not agree either. This was because the greatest benefit of being the crown prince was that he could stay in the palace and learn from the emperor. He could come into contact with political affairs early on, and when the emperor was not around, he could handle the court affairs on behalf of the emperor. This honor was unique, but if he left the capital on his own accord, then it would be the same as giving up his final advantage, so Imperial Mother would definitely not agree. Gong Yimo said seriously, "Brother Crown Prince, have you forgotten? Yesterday, His Majesty's meaning was very clear. Use your political achievements to prove your strength. Only those who win the hearts of the people can succeed the throne. Then, if you don't even leave the capital, how can you fight with the other brothers?" Her words made Gong Che ponder deeply. The main reason was that such a thing had never happened before, so he was still controlled by inertia and did not think too far ahead. Moreover, if the other party's first plan failed, they will definitely try another one. Now, how many more times can Big Brother resist? It's better to leave the capital and let them fight among themselves first. Her words deeply moved Gong Che. Gong Che was raised by the orthodox crown prince. Compared to fighting and scheming, his heart was filled more with the people. Many nights he spent burning the midnight oil, hoping that if he succeeded the throne one day, he would be a wise ruler like Imperial Father. Will Imperial Father agree? He was convinced, but would the Emperor give him a chance to leave the capital? What was the best reason for him to leave the capital? He could not help but ponder these questions, and he had to discuss it with the other strategists. No need to trouble yourself. Gong Yimo suddenly grinned, her eyes sparkling. "I have already thought of a wonderful idea for Brother Crown Prince," she said quickly. "If His Majesty doesn't agree, you can ask him. Didn't he say that he would give all the princes a chance? You're also a prince, so he naturally has to treat you equally. As for the reason for leaving the capital, the more arrogant, the better." Gong Che was stunned. Because she said that he was also a prince. In fact, there was no difference between a prince and a crown prince. She narrowed her eyes and said, "It's summer now, and Dongju, Shandong, has been fighting against floods every year. I wonder how it will be this year." Gong Che thought for a moment. The day before yesterday, there was a report saying that there was a lot of rain this year. They were afraid that the dikes were too short, and asked the capital to allocate funds to repair the dikes. Gong Yimo smiled. "That's great, don't worry. This year will be fine, but next year is the triennial flood year, so it's hard to say how it will be. Imperial Sister wants me to be ordered to repair the dikes." Gong Yimo shook her head. "Although that will make a difference, it won't be a great achievement. Moreover, it will take a short time, so I'm afraid that someone will snatch this from you." Gong Che couldn't help but laugh. His Imperial Sister was always so witty. Gong Yimo suddenly took out a piece of paper from her bosom. It was a simple map of the country that she had drawn herself. Her fair finger pointed at a place. "Brother Crown Prince, please take a look." Gong Yimo pointed at the Longtung River at the edge of the capital, then pointed at the Yulong Inner Canal directly below the Yangtze River. Today, the only canal in Daiyu State's dynasty is the Yulong Inner Canal, which was built during the spring and autumn period. Moreover, because it was only dug from the Yangtze River to Dongju, Shandong, Sy River, the water flow is blocked. In addition, there hasn't been any civil war in the past 100 years, so this inner canal is useless. I'm afraid that it's already blocked and abandoned. Following her words, Gong Che seemed to have a premonition of something, so he listened attentively. At the same time, with a light tap of her finger, a magnificent map of mountains and rivers slowly unfolded in his mind. "Therefore, I want Brother Crown Prince to accept the task of controlling the flood in Dongju, and use this task to request permission to reopen the Yulong Grand Canal and continue to dig it from the north to the south. The canal will go up from the Huai River, through the various waterways of the Huanglong, Yellow River, and finally connect it to the Longtung River in the capital, forming a straight line from north to south." Her words contained too much information, so much that Gong Che's heart trembled. He couldn't help but think carefully for a long time before replying. If all the canals are connected, in terms of topography, won't the water flow be diverted to one place? That way, the pressure in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River will multiply. Wouldn't this cure Dongju but bring disaster to the south? Gong Yimo stroked her chin and said with a profound look, "Water is alive. As long as it's channeled thoroughly, it won't become a disaster. The reason for the flood in Dongju is that the Huanglong waterway and the Yulong Inner Canal are blocked, so the water can't flow to other places, causing the dam to overflow. The second reason is that the riverbed is too high. However, when you rebuild the inner canal, you have to widen the channel, so this problem will be easily solved. Moreover, there are many waterways in the south. After the water is channeled into the Yangtze River, it will be dispersed through these waterways. It can be said that if one is solved, all will be solved. Finally, it will flow into the sea. As long as you manage it well, it won't be a pipe dream to solve the flood once and for all." Following her words, a road from the south to the north seemed to appear in Gong Chei's mind. Chapter 59. This was an extraordinary move. He had to be cautious. His mind was constantly guessing and summarizing the information conveyed through the past reports and the books he had read. He was beaming with joy and frowning at the same time. Finally, he sighed. No, he was still worried that it would cause pressure in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River. After all, there was only one main branch that connected to the sea. It was fine during normal times, but during the flood season, Star City would suffer. It's still not appropriate. This may work, but it needs to be carefully discussed. You must know that human strength cannot compete with the heavens and earth. Fire and water are merciless. I really don't want to cause a disaster because of my plan." Gong Yimo couldn't help but nod. She patted Gong Chei's shoulder in admiration. Gong Chei didn't let his ambition get to his head. Instead, he considered everything carefully and worried about the people. "Brother Crown Prince, you don't have to think about it anymore. I've already thought about it. If Brother Crown Prince is afraid that the south of the Yangtze River will be difficult to bear, why not build a waterway to connect to Guangzhou? You must know that if you can build a canal, you can build a second one. If this world wants to develop, it will ultimately rely on transportation. To connect this world, it can't be solved by a canal." Her words made Gong Chei's heart incomparably shocked. He could no longer suppress his ambition. Huai River directly connected to the capital. The Yangtze River connected to Guangzhou. As a man, who wouldn't want to achieve greatness? This project was magnificent and vast. It was majestic. It hadn't even started, but it was already shocking. Seeing that he was finally moved, Gong Yimo just smiled. The next problem was the implementation. This was the good thing about the ancient imperial power. As long as the power and wealth could keep up, there would be countless people dauntlessly advancing. So even if there was a problem in the future, why couldn't they build a canal to connect the Yangtze River to Guangzhou? It was a pity that there were too few talents and it was too backward. Otherwise, wouldn't it be good to take this opportunity to build a Three Gorges power station? She quickly blushed because of this idea. It was simply a fantasy to build the Three Gorges alone. Even if all the technicians who built the Three Gorges transmigrated here, they wouldn't be able to do it. Not to mention the burning of iron, the smelting of copper and other materials wouldn't meet the standards. In this place, there wasn't even reinforced concrete or petroleum, so she only dared to think about it. The more Gong Chei thought about it, the more excited he became. He climbed out of bed and paced back and forth. His mouth muttered something, but his eyes became brighter and brighter. You're right. I was too narrow-minded. This plan is really wonderful. That's great." Gong Chei couldn't think of any words to describe his current thoughts. He only felt that his brain had been injected with a stream of blood, and his entire vision had been broadened. If this matter was really handed over to him, then after the matter was completed, he would be able to obtain far more than what he had to pay. It was hard for him to imagine that this was all thought of by a 12-year-old girl like Gong Yimo. She was so intelligent that her words were enough to make people forget about her gender and only remember her talent. But, perhaps he was too excited, Gong Chei's expression became slightly perplexed again. "It's just that digging a canal is costly and time-consuming. I'm afraid." He was afraid that before the canal was completed, the situation in the capital would have already been set. This was also the reason why those ambitious princes were unwilling to leave the capital easily. Gong Yimo, on the other hand, had a scheming smile on his face. Don't worry, Imperial Father is still young and ambitious. He wants to make a name for himself. As long as he understands the benefits of connecting the North and the South, he will support it even if he has to empty the treasury. Moreover, she smiled faintly. In terms of money, I can also help. Moreover, I have a small way to prevent those officials from trying to trip you up. You don't have to worry about the time. I have an idea. If it works, we can connect the North and the South within 1 or 2 years. 1 or 2 years. No matter how calm Gong Che was, he was shocked by this number. He originally thought that no matter how fast it was, it would take at least 5 or 6 years. Gong Yimo, on the other hand, nodded affirmatively. Her eyes were full of confidence. Yes, this project is huge. In the eyes of outsiders, it will take a long time. Therefore, even if some princes are itching, they won't fight with you over the time. Moreover, building the canal isn't something that you can complete alone. You will need some small helpers. She smiled like a little fox. And these helpers can't be just anyone. You need to ask Imperial Father for permission to personally appoint the sons of important officials such as the Ministry of Revenue and the Cabinet Elder to assist you. With these people, those old officials who want a share of the profits won't make things too difficult for you in the future. After all, if this project is completed, everyone will know that it will be a great achievement that will be passed down through the ages. It's just that it will take too long. Therefore, those old officials may not send the children that are valued by their clans. They will definitely choose the second or youngest son of the first wife to follow. Firstly, it's also a kind of training. In the future, when the canal is completed, not only will they bring glory to their clans, they will also have the opportunity to be rewarded. Those children who are not from the political center are not a threat to us at all. The more she said, the more pleased she felt. Now that the emperor has just deprived you of the special status of the crown prince, those princes can't think straight for a while. They will definitely fight to the death in the capital. Therefore, if you want to leave, they will definitely not stop you. Instead, they will take the opportunity to help you. And to take full control of this matter, the process will be very simple. She took a breath and said, everything is difficult at the beginning. At first, they won't fight with you, but later, when they see that your cultivation is so fast and that you can expect to complete it in 1 or 2 years, it will be too late no matter how anxious they are. She said the last 2 words as if she wanted to continue. It was as if she could already see the scene of those princes beating their chests and stamping their feet. However, Gong Che was amazed in his heart. It could be said that she had thought of everything. She had even considered the lack of funds in the future, whether the courtiers would make things difficult for them, and other aspects of the problem. She had even made a list of countermeasures. Gong Che couldn't understand. How could her small brain be so broad? It was as if the world was in her mind and she could easily grasp it at her fingertips. Many of the things that needed to be carefully considered and discussed with strategists over several months were actually said by her in just a few simple words. Moreover, it only took her 1 night. Just when Gong Che was shocked, moved, and somewhat ashamed, Gong Yimo suddenly said, "Only, I hope that Gong Dai will also participate in this matter." Hearing Gong Yimo's words, Gong Che was suddenly stunned. He didn't know why, but when he heard Gong Yimo mention Gong Dai's name, the smile on his face disappeared. However, Gong Yimo didn't notice and was still focused on analyzing the situation. Gong Dai is going to the West Continent this time because there are already countless water storage canals in the West Continent. He is only responsible for choosing the right place, ordering people to dig a shaft, and then determining the location to have people connect the underground water channel. It won't take too much time. After all, Junshi of Gojosian is there. He can't go past Junshi of Gojosian. Therefore, in the later stages, he can completely free up his hands and leave after making arrangements. However, digging canals is different. Chapter 60. Gong Yimo analyzed the situation one by one. In the beginning, even with father's full support, because of the need to recruit laborers and corvées, everyone will think that every step will be difficult. But if we use my method, after a year, they will become alert and ponder the benefits. Those who hear the news will definitely want a piece of the pie. When that time comes, even if the ministers don't stop us for the sake of their children, it's hard to say what the princes will do. She didn't speak quickly, but her words were clear and logical, and every word hit the nail on the head. Instead of waiting for others to come, it's better to share it with Gong Dai. This is one of the conditions for my full support. He clearly knew that Gong Dai's help was better than those greedy wolves, but Gong Che couldn't suppress the jealousy in his heart. I'm afraid father won't agree. He was the crown prince and represented the emperor to dig the canal. In the hearts of the people, it was equivalent to the emperor himself. But Gong Dai didn't have anything. Even if someone wanted to get a share in the future, how could Gong Dai compete with them? Gong Yimo smiled confidently. He was taught by me. I know what he is capable of. As long as he perfectly and quickly completes the canal work in Shizhou that others can't complete in 6 or 7 years, he will definitely be able to compete with those people with his flood control experience. If he couldn't even compete with those people, he wouldn't be the frightening regent in the future. Gong Che, on the other hand, was even more depressed. He felt that as an elder brother, he should smile at this time. After all, Gong Yimo had pointed out a way out for him. He should be grateful, so he should be happy and magnanimously express his willingness to accept. But when he thought that Gong Yimo couldn't forget Gong Dai and was always on his side, Gong Che couldn't help but feel a trace of unwillingness in his heart. Wasn't it just 3 years of mutual help in the cold palace? Why couldn't he compete? Gong Yimo naturally didn't know what Gong Che was thinking. Seeing him deep in thought, she thought he was considering the details. Her purpose was naturally more than that. Her little head was spinning fast. All the rules and regulations were laid out one by one. The pros and cons were clear at a glance. First of all, Gong Che would definitely benefit a lot from this matter. After all, Gong Che's maternal family, the Liu family, was also in the south. They were also a large aristocratic family. Once they left the capital, the power of these large families would be displayed. With the help of the Liu family, once the communication between the north and south was established, the emperor's regional power would be strengthened. If the emperor was happy, he would definitely let the Liu family be his acting vassal. Not to mention, once the communication between the north and south was established, the Liu family would be able to gain a lot of benefits through the canal. Moreover, the children of those ministers followed Gong Che. Although they didn't know anything, they had a high status and had been polished several times. They were also of help to Gong Che. This was only a benefit for Gong Che. What about herself? Gong Yimo's eyes flashed, and the corner of his mouth involuntarily revealed a victorious smile. She was the one who had the earliest advantage and the one who had the most right to speak. The shops in her hands were only in the capital and could no longer satisfy her needs. If she could follow the canal and expand her business all the way to the south, it wouldn't be impossible. Most importantly, she could use Gong Che's merit in opening the canal to ask the emperor for the right to transport goods before anyone could react. Even if she couldn't monopolize it, her trading fleet would have to be legal. If the Grand Canal was filled with her trading ships, she didn't dare to think about the benefits behind it. Water could make money. As long as she had the right to speak, then whether it was transporting goods, carrying passengers, or even smuggling, she would be able to gain a large portion of the benefits. Gong Yimo thought of this and slowly sighed. Finally, she smiled, revealing her pure white teeth. She had never been a person who killed 2 birds with 1 arrow. What she wanted was to kill more with 1 arrow, the more the better. When Gong Che hurriedly went to see the Empress early in the morning and persuaded the Empress to hand over the phoenix seal to cultivate, unexpectedly, the Empress did not shout to stop him. Instead, she was terrifyingly silent. Gong Che originally had his head down, but seeing that his mother didn't speak for a long time, he raised his head to look. Who would have thought that when he looked, she was actually crying? 2 lines of tears silently fell. Her eyes were sad, but she didn't make a single sound. Mother! He walked a few steps forward and carefully wiped away her tears. However, the Empress' tears were like a broken string of pearls that kept falling. In just a short month, she seemed to have aged a dozen years. Her mind had also become weak and gentle. She was no longer as elegant as she had been in the past. The Empress grabbed Gong Chei's hand and raised her head to speak with tears in her eyes. Son, don't worry. Mother will do as you say. Only son. Are you really going to give up like this? She had thought that Gong Chei asking to repair the canal that might not be finished in 5 or 6 years was because he was disheartened and had already given up on the fight for the throne. Gong Chei couldn't help laughing. Thus, he lowered his head and repeated Gong Yimo's words to the Empress. Originally, if his mother knew about this, she would definitely ask if Gong Yimo was really confident, or if she had a way to build the canal so quickly, and so on. Who would have thought that after hearing Gong Chei's words, the Empress' eyes would light up? She grabbed Gong Chei's hand and anxiously said, "Are you serious? Did Chaoyang Princess really say all of this?" Gong Chei nodded and said yes. The Empress suddenly laughed loudly. The Empress' laughter made the palace maids guarding the palace gate feel a wave of fear in their hearts. The Empress. Did she finally go crazy because of the continuous blows? Then what should they do? Even Gong Chei was a bit afraid. He patted the Empress' shoulder, but he saw the Empress suddenly raise her head to look at him. That gaze made his heart tremble. Good. Good, good. She said good 3 times in a row. If everything Gong Yimo said was true, then when his son returned, there would be no need to worry about not having a chance to turn things around. That would be a great achievement. Good. Good. At this time, the Empress was indeed a bit muddle-headed because of their ups and downs, but she still firmly held her son's hand and her face regained its spirit once again. If there was such a good opportunity after leaving the capital, then the Crown Prince's unique privilege of participating in politics was not a rare thing. If all of this is what Chaoyang Princess said, then do it. Son. Mother believes in you. Mother will wait for your return at the sacred Buddha temple. Gong Chei felt that it was very strange. He didn't understand why his mother trusted Gong Yimo more than him. Mother, are you not afraid that I will completely lose my power after leaving the capital? The Empress shook her head. Her phoenix eyes once again lit up as she calculated. Although Mother has gone to the temple, the Liu family is still here. Mother will protect the capital for you. Also, since this is what Chaoyang Princess wants, since she said it, she will definitely do it. Saying this, her expression was dignified and she sighed as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. That Gong Yimo. She has a benevolent heart and also has the attitude of a hero. She is not an ordinary woman. Son, Mother was blind before. Chapter 61. After all, the Empress was 40 years old. She had seen so many people and things. Now that she had experienced so many ups and downs, she was very good at judging people. She said that Gong Yimo was an ambitious woman because although she was benevolent, she was able to kill an assassin at the age of 10. Although she looked harmless, she was full of schemes. She had ambition and dared to put it into practice. If she wasn't an ambitious woman, what was she? When Gong Chei heard the Empress' high praise, Gong Chei was shocked, but he wasn't dissatisfied at all. He was very happy that his Empress mother approved of him. Don't mention the past anymore. Imperial sister won't mind. When Gong Chei thought of Gong Yimo, for some reason, his face became very gentle. Imperial sister, she, is indeed a powerful and broad-minded person. When the Empress saw him like this, she didn't know why, but she felt a little uneasy. She hesitated. After a while, she opened her mouth. Son, do you have feelings for that Gong Yimo? She didn't say the last 4 words. She just looked at Gong Chei with a thoughtful expression. When Gong Chei came back to his senses, he heard, Chem? Imperial Mother, what did you just say? Looking at the gentle and confident glow on her son's handsome face, the Empress shook her head evasively. Nothing, there's no time to lose. Imperial Mother will go see your Imperial Father now. It's just that. She looked at Gong Chei and wanted to say something, but stopped. It's just that, that's your sister. Even if they aren't related by blood, this is a crime against the world. But she didn't say it. Now that they were in a precarious situation, why should she say it? Thinking that he wouldn't be able to see the Empress for a long time, Gongche stayed with her and said a few more words before finally leaving. The moment he stepped out of Fengqi Palace, Gongche looked at the blue sky and white clouds. His heart suddenly filled with infinite joy. He was going to leave. He was going to build his own business and break through this world. Gongche looked in the direction of Zhaoyang Hall and smiled slightly. When he came back, he would no longer be controlled by others. The weather in the capital had always been dry and sunny. Sure enough, the next day, when Gongche proposed to leave the capital to build a canal, the court was in an uproar. Everyone looked at him with a strange gaze. Had the crown prince gone crazy from all the provocations he had received today? One must know that the crown prince's only privilege was to govern the country on behalf of the emperor. How could he give up such a good opportunity to build a canal? And according to the crown prince's plan. Moreover, it was indeed marvelous. The benefits it could bring were innumerable. Once it was completed, it would be a great achievement. But who knew how many years it? 8. At that time, everything would be settled. What would be the point of all these achievements? Using such a method to increase one's political achievements was simply too foolish. Therefore, under such strange gazes, not a single official stood out to refute. Gongche stood below the imperial court with his back ramrod straight. He ignored those gazes and faced the emperor directly. Gongcheng's fingers tapped on the dragon throne as he pondered. Yesterday, the empress sent someone to hand over the phoenix seal. She said she would enter the temple to pray for the people. But here, his son proposed to leave the capital to control the flood and build a canal. In the eyes of outsiders, the crown prince was already muddling along and was disheartened, so he accepted the order to leave the capital. However, he was able to pull himself together in such a short period of time, stand here in high spirits, and make such a decision. Gongcheng felt that his son had not collapsed. He just didn't know why he wanted to build a canal. It was indeed too long. Gongche was chilled by the emperor's stare. Did imperial father see something? Gongche's mind was full of thoughts. His spirit was highly concentrated. This is a good thing. The emperor suddenly laughed and praised in a voice as loud as a bell. That's a wonderful idea. Although the project is vast, it will be a good thing for the country and the people if it is really built. Looks like he agreed. Gongche heaved a sigh of relief. Gongcheng stared at him without blinking. Being stared at by the emperor like this, Gongche's heart was raised again. This matter, Jin will fully support it. No matter how long it takes to build it, Jin will undertake it. But, Che, do you really want to take this task? Gongche took a deep breath. At this time, his eyebrows were gentle and calm. The elegance that belonged to the crown prince once again appeared on his body. This son is willing to accept the order. If the canal is not built, this son will not return to the capital. His determination made the ministers gasp. The crown prince must be crazy. He was stimulated to the point of madness. Gongcheng was also very surprised. He leaned forward in his dragon throne as if he wanted to see through the other side. This matter is hard and heavy. Che, do you have any requests? Gongche slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He raised his head and said the prepared script. This son has 3 requests. Oh! For this child who has always been very gentle, this is the first time he is so strong. Gongcheng waved his hand. There's no harm in saying it. Gongche smiled slightly. First, this son will be gone for many years. I hope that imperial father can look after imperial mother for returning the phoenix seal. Your filial piety is commendable. Jin will allow it. Gongche's eyes brightened, and he smiled again. Second, this son hopes that no matter how long this son will cultivate, imperial father will not send another person to take charge. This matter can only be handled by this son. This made Gongcheng a little strange. Is there anyone who wants to compete with him for the right to take charge? He smiled. This matter is huge. I'm afraid your energy will be limited. Gongche smiled gently. That's the 3rd request. Because this matter is huge, this son wants the ministers to send their talented children. First, it's to train the talents for our Dayu state. Second, they can be used by me. I hope imperial father will grant these 3 requests. Gongcheng's eyes flash. He pondered for a moment, then leaned back on the dragon throne and looked down at the ministers. Does anyone have any objections? All the ministers looked at each other. What can they do about this kind of good thing? They don't have much, but they have a lot of sons. When the time comes, they can send a favored child who has no official position. When he comes back, he will be promoted. As for whether the child sent is talented or not, this is not something the crown prince can decide. Therefore, for a moment, all the ministers nodded and praised the crown prince for his benevolence and thoughtfulness. Gong Cheng looked down at the court. It's been a long time since he saw such a happy scene. Some time ago, they were like aggressive roosters who fought until their eyes turned red. Now that they finally forced the main character out of the capital, they must be very proud, right? Gong Che just looked at them and smiled at these praises without saying anything. A month ago, these people forced his grandfather to bleed on the spot. Now, they are praising him for his filial piety. This is the imperial court. He tried to make himself smile benevolently and gently. He should have been used to this kind of imperial court long ago. He couldn't help but think of Gong Yimo. She was the only one who sincerely thought for him. She gave him advice and thought about everything. Gong Che's heart warmed, and he suddenly wanted to go home. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.